Welcome, dear wanderer. Come, lay down your burdens and find a comfortable place to rest. Tonight, we embark on a journey across the wine-dark sea, following a hero who longs only for the peace of his own hearth. It is a tale of endurance, of magic islands, and of the guiding light of the stars. But for now, let your breathing slow. Inhale the calm, exhale the day. Dim the lights of your mind. Let your body sink into the softness of your bed, safe and warm. As the waves of this ancient story lap gently against the shore of your consciousness, allow yourself to drift away into deep, restorative sleep. Book 1. The Gods in Council. Minerva's Visit to Ithaca. The challenge from Telemachus to the suitors. Far away, under the vast and quiet sky, a traveler wandered through many lands. He had seen great cities and distant shores. He had sailed across the deep blue sea, watching the stars for guidance. Though he had journeyed far, his heart remained tethered to his home. He longed for the familiar sight of his own hearth and the rolling hills of his country. For a long time, he rested on a lush, green island in the middle of the ocean. A gentle goddess lived there in a quiet cave. She enjoyed his company and the peaceful days they shared. Yet, as the seasons turned and the years drifted by, the traveler sat by the shore. He watched the waves lap against the sand, dreaming of the day he might return to his family. High above the clouds, where the air is always still and clear, the gods gathered. They met in the golden halls of Olympus. They spoke in low, calm voices about the world below. They remembered the traveler and his long journey. Athena, whose eyes were bright like the morning sea, spoke gently to her father. She told him of the traveler on the faraway island. She described the thick forests and the soft mists that surrounded him. She wished for him to see his home again. Her father, the king of the gods, nodded slowly. He agreed that it was time for the traveler's long rest to end. Athena prepared to leave the high mountain. She bound on her golden sandals, which were light as air. She did not carry weapons of war, but only a staff for walking. She slipped from the peaks of Olympus and glided down like a soft breeze. She crossed the shimmering sea and arrived in the land of Ithaca. She stood at the gateway of a great house. Inside, the air was filled with the sounds of a feast. Many guests sat on comfortable seats covered in soft hides. They played games and enjoyed the food set before them. Servants moved quietly through the hall. They mixed wine with cool water and wiped the tables with fresh sponges. Telemachus sat among the guests. He was a thoughtful young man, often lost in daydreams about his missing father. He wondered if his father would ever walk through the door again. As he sat in deep thought, he noticed the stranger standing at the gate. He rose quickly, for he was kind and welcoming to all travelers. He walked to the gate and took the stranger's hand warmly. He invited her inside to rest and eat. He led her to a beautiful chair draped with a soft cloth. He placed a footstool beneath her feet so she could relax. They sat together in a quiet corner, away from the noise of the other guests. A maid brought a golden pitcher and poured cool water over their hands. A table was set before them with fresh bread and plates of meats. They ate and drank in peace. Telemachus spoke in a hushed voice. He asked the stranger who she was and where she had come from. Athena, disguised as a wise old friend, told him stories of the sea. She spoke of ships and favorable winds. She told him that his father was not gone forever. She said the traveler was held back by the ocean, but would find a way home. Her words brought a warm comfort to the young man's heart. She advised him to gather a ship and a crew. She told him to sail to neighboring lands to ask for news of his father. The journey would bring him hope. As they finished speaking, Athena rose to leave. She did not walk out the door, but seemed to vanish like a bird taking flight into the sky. Telemachus felt a new strength within him. He knew he had been visited by a guardian spirit. In the main hall, a musician began to play a lyre. The melody was sweet and sad, floating up to the high rooms of the house. Penelope, the lady of the house, heard the song. She came down the long staircase, attended by her handmaids. She held a sheer veil before her face. She stood by a tall wooden pillar and listened. The song reminded her of her husband, and tears came to her eyes. She asked the musician to play something happier. Telemachus spoke gently to his mother. He told her to be strong and to let the music play. She nodded and returned to her room, where sleep soon found her. The evening grew late. The sun dipped below the horizon, and shadows stretched across the floor. The guests finished their meal and began to yawn. One by one, they left the hall to find their beds in the town. The great house became quiet. Telemachus walked to his bedroom, which was high in a tower. The room looked out over the courtyard. A kind old nurse, who had cared for him since he was a baby, walked before him. She carried a pair of burning torches to light the way. He entered the peaceful room and sat on the edge of his bed. He took off his soft tunic and handed it to the nurse. She folded it neatly and hung it on a peg by the wall. She wished him a good night and quietly left the room, closing the door with a silver latch. Telemachus lay down and pulled a warm fleece blanket up to his chin. The room was dark and safe. He thought about the stranger's words and the journey he would soon take. Outside, the night was silent. Slowly, his eyes closed, and he drifted into a deep and restful sleep. Book 2, Assembly of the People of Ithaca, Speeches of Telemachus and of the Suitors. Telemachus makes his preparations and starts for Pylos with Minerva disguised as Mentor. The light of morning arrived softly, painting the sky with rosy fingers of dawn. Telemachus woke from his slumber in the quiet house. He rose slowly and dressed in the comfort of his room. He placed sandals upon his feet and walked out into the gentle morning air. The world was still waking up. He looked peaceful, glowing with a calm grace as he walked. He sent word for the people to gather in the open square. They came together slowly, their voices low and murmuring like a distant stream. Telemachus walked to his father's seat. The elders made room for him with respect. The air was cool and fresh. An old man named Odysseus spoke first. His voice was weathered by time. He spoke of days gone by and friends who had traveled far. He missed his sons and the old king. His words were filled with a gentle longing for the past. He wondered why they had gathered on this quiet morning. He hoped for good news and peace for everyone present. Telemachus stood up to speak. He held a wooden staff in his hand. He looked at the faces around him. He spoke of his home and his father, Ulysses. He explained that he missed the guidance of his father. He spoke of the visitors in his house. They stayed too long and feasted too often. He worried for his home. He asked the men to understand his heart. He wished for his house to be peaceful again. He asked them to let him find his own path. The assembly listened. Some men spoke in turn. There were differences of opinion, but the morning remained calm. Antinous spoke of the queen, Penelope. He told of her weaving a great web by day. He told how she unraveled it by the soft light of torches at night. She was waiting for the right time. The men wanted her to choose a new husband. They wished to return to their own lands. Telemachus listened to their words. He could not send his mother away. It was not the right thing to do. He asked them to let him go on a journey instead. He wanted to sail to distant lands. He wanted to ask about his father. If he found news, he would know what to do. High above, birds flew across the blue sky. They drifted on the wind, moving together. The people watched them fly towards the town. An old prophet saw them as a sign of change. He spoke of Ulysses returning home after many years. He said the waiting was almost over. The gathering ended peacefully. The men returned to their homes. The visitors went back to the house of Ulysses to eat and rest. Telemachus walked alone to the edge of the sea. The water was gray and rhythmic against the shore. He washed his hands in the cool waves. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer. He asked for guidance for his journey. He asked for a way to cross the wide ocean. A comforting presence appeared beside him. It was Minerva, though she looked like his father's old friend, mentor. Her voice was soothing and wise. She told him he had strength within him. She told him his journey would be safe. She promised to find him a ship. She promised to sail with him as a guide. She told him to prepare his supplies. Telemachus felt a new hope. He walked back to his house. The visitors were preparing their meal in the courtyard. The air smelled of roasting meat. Telemachus moved past them without a word. He went down to the high-ceilinged storeroom. It was a quiet place, filled with the scent of cedar and old wine. Gold and bronze lay in peaceful heaps. Chests of linen stood open. Large clay jars of fragrant olive oil lined the walls. Casks of sweet, aged wine waited in the cool shadows. The room was safe and still. The faithful nurse, Euryclea, was there. She watched over the treasures day and night. Telemachus spoke softly to her. He asked her to fill 12 jars with the best wine. He asked for leather bags filled with barley meal. He told her to be quick and quiet. He explained he was leaving that evening. He was going to search for news of his father. The old nurse felt a worry in her heart. She did not want him to cross the restless sea. She wanted him to stay safe at home. But Telemachus comforted her. He told her a higher power was watching over him. He asked her to keep his secret for a few days. She promised she would. She began to pour the wine and pack the meal. The room was filled with the soft sounds of preparation. Outside, the sun began to set. Darkness covered the land like a soft blanket. Minerva, in her disguise, walked through the town. She found a good ship. She gathered a crew of strong men. They met by the harbor as the stars came out. Minerva then went to the house where the visitors feasted. She cast a gentle spell of sleep upon them. Their eyes grew heavy. Their heads nodded. They left their cups and went into the town to find their beds. The house became quiet. She called Telemachus outside. The night air was cool and inviting. They walked to the ship. The crew was waiting by the water. They carried the wine and the barley meal on board. They stowed everything away neatly. Telemachus sat in the stern of the boat. Minerva sat beside him. The men untied the ropes. They raised the mast of pine. They pulled up the white sails with leather ropes. A gentle wind from the west arrived to help them. It whistled softly over the dark blue waves. The sail filled with the breeze. The ship began to move. The water parted around the bow with a soothing hush. The foam whispered against the wood. They poured a drink offering to the stars and the gods. The ship sailed on, steady and true. It moved through the peaceful night, guided by the wind, sailing until the dawn. Book 3, Telemachus visits Nestor at Pylos. The sun rose slowly from the calm, fair sea. It climbed into the quiet sky to bring warm light to the world. The travelers arrived at the sandy shores of Pylos. The ship glided gently to a stop. The people of the city were gathered by the water. They sat in peaceful groups on the soft sand. A gentle feast was being prepared in the morning air. The scent of the meal drifted on the breeze. Telemachus stepped onto the shore. His wise friend led the way. She spoke to him in a soothing voice. "Do not be shy," she whispered. "You are here to learn of your father. Speak openly to the wise King Nestor. He is kind and will tell you the truth." Telemachus took a deep breath. He followed her across the warm sand. They approached the place where the people sat. King Nestor sat with his sons. The air was filled with the comfort of family and friends. When they saw the newcomers, they smiled. They waved them over with welcoming hands. Nestor's son stood up to greet them. He took their hands warmly. He led them to a comfortable spot on the sand. He spread out soft, thick sheepskins for them to sit upon. He served them warm food and sweet wine. He handed a golden cup to the wise guide first. "Please," the young man said softly, "offer a prayer of thanks to the ocean. We are all gathered here in peace. When you have spoken, pass the cup to your friend." The guide held the cup. She closed her eyes and spoke words of gratitude. She asked for safety and peace for Nestor and his family. She asked for a safe journey for herself and Telemachus. She passed the cup to the young traveler. He repeated the gentle words. They all ate and drank in the pleasant shade. When the meal was done, King Nestor spoke. His voice was deep and calm, like an old oak tree. "Welcome, friends," he said. "Now that we have eaten, tell us of your journey. From where do you sail across the blue water?" Telemachus felt brave and calm. "We come from Ithaca," he answered. "I seek news of my father, Ulysses. We have not heard from him in a long time. I hope you might share a memory of him." Nestor nodded slowly. His eyes looked out toward the horizon. "Ah, you remind me of days long past," he said. "We spent many years together. Your father was a wise and steady man." The old king told stories of their travels. He spoke of the vast ocean and the winds. He told of how they worked together with a single heart. He spoke of the long journey home. "The sea is vast," Nestor explained gently. "The winds guide us in their own time. Some returned home quickly. Others drifted for a while on the waves." He spoke of friends who had returned safely. He mentioned those who were still traveling. His voice was rhythmic and soothing. It was a story told by the warmth of a fire. "Do not wander too long," Nestor advised kindly. "Home is where the heart rests. But you must visit Menelaus. He has traveled far and seen much. He will welcome you." The sun began to set. The light turned golden and dim. Shadows stretched softly across the sand. "It is time to rest," the guide said. "We should return to our ship." But Nestor shook his head with a smile. "No, my friends. You must stay with me. I have many soft rugs and warm blankets. You shall sleep in comfort tonight." The guide smiled back. "You are very kind. Telemachus shall stay with you. I will return to the ship to watch over the crew." Then she turned and seemed to vanish. She moved with the grace of a sea eagle taking flight. The people watched in wonder. They knew a guardian spirit had been among them. Nestor took Telemachus by the hand. "Come," he said. "We will go to my house. We will rest." They walked to the king's home. It was a place of tall pillars and cool stone. The king mixed a bowl of sweet, mellow wine. They poured a little on the ground as a thanks to the stars. Telemachus was led to a quiet room. He lay down on a soft bed. The night was still. He fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. Morning arrived with rosy light. The sky turned a soft pink. Nestor rose from his bed. He went to sit on a smooth bench of white stone in front of his house. His sons gathered around him. They stood tall and strong. Telemachus joined them in the fresh morning air. "Let us give thanks for the new day," Nestor said. "Let us prepare a gift for the heavens." The family moved with quiet purpose. They brought a gentle heifer from the field. A craftsman came to decorate its horns with gold. It was a beautiful offering of peace. They washed their hands in clear spring water. They sprinkled white barley meal. They stood together in the gentle light. They offered their thanks to the sky for safety and guidance. The ceremony was respectful and calm. Afterward, they prepared a morning feast. The aroma of roasting meat filled the courtyard. Nestor's youngest daughter brought warm water. She washed the dust of travel from Telemachus. She rubbed his skin with fragrant oil. She gave him a clean, soft tunic and a warm cloak. He looked fresh and rested. He sat beside the old king. They ate together in the sunlight. "Now," Nestor said softly, "it is time for you to continue your journey. The horses are ready." The chariot stood waiting. The horses were strong and swift. The housekeeper packed bread and wine for the road. Telemachus climbed into the chariot. Nestor's son took the reins. He urged the horses forward gently. They rolled out of the city gates. The wheels hummed on the path. They left the high walls of Pylus behind. They traveled all day through the open country. The yoke swayed rhythmically on the horses' necks. They passed green fields and rolling hills. The sun went down slowly. Darkness covered the land like a soft blanket. They arrived at a friendly town called Phery. A kind man named Diocles welcomed them. He gave them a place to sleep. The night passed in silence. When the rosy dawn appeared again, they woke. They yoked the horses once more. The chariot rolled through the echoing gates. The horses flew forward, happy to run. They moved through the rich cornlands. The grain waved in the breeze. The journey was smooth and steady. The day passed in a gentle rhythm. The sun set once more, and the world was at peace. Book 4. The Visit to King Menelaus, who tells his story. Meanwhile, the suitors in Ithaca plot against Telemachus. The travelers arrived at the quiet city in the valley. The sun dipped low, casting long, soft shadows. They approached the home of the noble King Menelaus. Inside the great house, a celebration was underway. Music floated through the air, gentle and sweet. Friends and family gathered in the warm glow of the hall. They shared a feast, their voices low and happy. A singer played a harp, the notes drifting like leaves. Servants came to the gate to welcome the guests. They spoke in hushed, respectful tones. The horses were unyoked and led to comfortable stalls. They were given fresh oats and cool water. The chariot was leaned against the wall to rest. Telemachus and his friends stepped into the courtyard. They marveled at the splendor of the house. It shone with the light of the sun and the moon. They entered the bathing rooms to wash away the dust. Warm water soothed their tired limbs. Soft oil was smoothed over their skin. They were wrapped in fresh, woolly cloaks and tunics. Feeling refreshed, they took their seats near the king. A maid poured water from a golden pitcher. They washed their hands in a silver basin. A table of polished wood was placed before them. Bread and fine foods were offered with generous hands. Menelaus greeted them with a warm smile. He invited them to eat and rest their hearts. The room glittered with bronze and gold. Amber and ivory caught the light of the torches. Telemachus whispered to his friend, admiring the beauty. The king heard him and spoke gently. He told them of his long travels across the sea. He spoke of the distant lands of Cyprus and Egypt. He described pastures where flocks grazed peacefully. The sheep there gave milk all year round. Every home was filled with plenty and comfort. Menelaus remembered his past with a quiet nostalgia. He thought of friends who were no longer there. A gentle sadness touched his heart, but it passed. He spoke of Ulysses, the brave wanderer. He missed his old friend dearly. Telemachus listened, and a tear rolled down his cheek. He held his cloak to his face to hide his emotion. The moment was tender and full of respect. Then Helen entered the room from her high chamber. She looked as lovely as the moon rising. Her maids brought her a soft seat and a rug of wool. They placed a silver workbox by her side. It was filled with violet-colored yarn. Helen sat and placed her feet on a stool. She looked at the young guest with kind eyes. She saw the likeness to his father immediately. She spoke of Ulysses with fond reverence. The memories brought a shared warmth to the room. They talked of the past, but the grief was soft. They remembered the heroes with love. The son of Nestor spoke wisely and calmly. He asked that they put aside sorrow for the evening. It was a time for rest and good food. Menelaus agreed, praising the young man's wisdom. Water was poured again for their hands. They continued their meal in peace. Helen wished to ease their hearts even further. She added a soothing herb to the wine bowl. It was a gift from a wise woman of Egypt. The herb brought forgetfulness of all trouble. It calmed the spirit and banished all care. She served the wine and told a story. She spoke of Ulysses and his great patience. She told how he once entered Troy in disguise. He had been clever and brave. Menelaus added his own memory of the wooden horse. He recalled the silence and the waiting in the dark. He remembered how Ulysses kept them safe and quiet. The hour grew late, and eyelids grew heavy. Telemachus asked for the blessing of sleep. Helen ordered beds to be made in the porch. Maids carried torches and spread purple rugs. They added sheets and thick, warm cloaks. The guests lay down under the quiet stars. Sleep came to them, deep and restorative. Menelaus rested in his inner room. The palace fell into a peaceful silence. When the rosy-fingered dawn arrived, the house stirred. Menelaus rose and dressed in fine clothes. He sat with Telemachus to speak of the journey. Telemachus asked for news of his father. He spoke of his home and the waiting there. Menelaus listened with a caring heart. He promised to tell all he knew from the sea. He spoke of the old man of the sea, Proteus. He told of being becalmed on a sandy island. The days had passed slowly under the sun. A sea goddess had taken pity on him. She showed him how to find her father. The old man Menelaus described the ambush on the beach. They waited in the sand as the seals came up to sleep. The old man of the sea lay down among his flock. Menelaus and his men held him fast. The old man changed his shape like a dream. He became a lion, a dragon, a tree, and water, but they held on with patience and strength. Finally, the old man returned to his true form. He told Menelaus how to return home. He spoke of the winds and the will of the gods. He gave news of those who had sailed from Troy. He said that Ulysses was alive on an island. He was with the nymph Calypso, far away. Menelaus finished his tale and offered gifts. He offered a silver bowl made by the gods. Telemachus accepted the friendship with gratitude. Meanwhile, in Ithaca, the palace was busy. Men gathered in the courtyard. They did not know Telemachus had sailed away. When they learned he was gone, they were surprised. Some were anxious, but the day continued. Penelope sat in her upper room. She learned her son was at sea. Her heart fluttered with a mother's worry. She lay on the floor, surrounded by her maids. They wept softly together, sharing the burden. The old nurse Euryclea comforted her mistress. She told Penelope to pray to the goddess Minerva. Penelope washed and calmed her spirit. She offered a prayer for her son's safety. Night fell over the island of Ithaca. Penelope lay on her bed, her mind drifting. She was like a lioness resting after a long day. Sleep finally overtook her weary eyes. Minerva sent a soothing vision to her. A phantom that looked like her sister appeared. It hovered over her bed, whispering comfort. The vision told her to cease her sorrow. The gods were watching over her son. He would return safely to his home. Penelope felt a wave of relief in her dream. She asked of her husband, but the vision faded. She woke feeling refreshed and hopeful. On the dark sea, a ship sailed silently. The men of the island waited on the water. They lay in a harbor of a rocky island. The stars wheeled overhead in the vast sky. The ocean breathed with a slow, rhythmic tide. All was waiting. All was calm. The story rested on the gentle waves. Book 5, Calypso. Ulysses reaches Scheria on a raft. Dawn rose softly from her resting place. Her light touched the world with a gentle glow. The gods gathered in their high and quiet halls. They spoke in low voices about the traveler, Ulysses. Minerva wished for him to return to his home. She spoke of him with kindness and care. The great father Jove nodded his head in agreement. He decided it was time for the long journey to end. He called for Mercury, the messenger with the golden sandals. Mercury was to fly across the sea to the island of Calypso. He would tell her to let the traveler go. The journey home would be long but steady. Ulysses would sail on a raft across the deep blue waters. He would reach a fertile land where people would welcome him. Mercury bound his golden sandals to his feet. He felt the air lift him up like a bird. He flew over the mountains and the white-capped waves. The wind carried him smoothly toward the distant island. He skimmed the water like a seabird in flight. At last, he reached the violet sea and the green island. He walked through the quiet woods to the cave. A fire burned gently on the hearth inside. The air was sweet with the scent of cedar and sandalwood. Calypso was busy at her great loom. She wove with golden thread and sang a soft melody. Outside, the trees stood tall and still. Alder and poplar trees gave shade to the birds. Owls and hawks rested in the branches. A vine laden with grapes grew around the cave entrance. For clear springs of water flowed through the garden. They watered beds of soft violets and green herbs. It was a place where even a god would pause to rest. Mercury stood and admired the beauty of the grove. He entered the cave, and Calypso knew him at once. She offered him a seat and fresh refreshment. They shared nectar and ambrosia in the quiet dimness. Mercury spoke the will of the gods gently. He told her that Ulysses must return to his own land. Calypso listened, though her heart was sad to lose her friend. She cared for the traveler and had kept him safe. But she knew the time had come for him to leave. She promised to help him on his way. She would give him advice for a safe voyage. Calypso went out to find Ulysses by the shore. He was sitting by the water, looking at the horizon. He missed his home and his family very much. The goddess stood beside him and spoke softly. She told him he did not need to be sad any longer. She would help him build a strong raft. She would fill it with bread and sweet water. She promised to send a fair wind to fill his sails. Ulysses looked at her, wondering if it was true. He asked for her promise that he would be safe. She smiled and touched his hand gently. She promised him she meant only good things. Her heart was kind, and she wished him well. They returned to the cave as the sun began to set. They ate a quiet meal together in the twilight. The next morning, the sky was bright and clear. Calypso wore a long, silver robe that shimmered. She gave Ulysses a heavy bronze axe for the wood. She led him to a grove of tall, dry trees. The wood was light and seasoned, perfect for floating. Ulysses worked with a steady, rhythmic motion. He cut the timber and smoothed it down. The sound of the axe echoed softly in the woods. He bored holes and fitted the beams together. He made a broad deck and a strong mast. Calypso brought white linen to make the sails. He fashioned a rudder to steer the craft. Soon, the raft was ready to take to the water. On the 5th day, he was ready to depart. Calypso gave him warm clothes and soft skins for sleeping. She placed food and wine on the deck. She called up a gentle, warm breeze to push him forward. Ulysses spread his sail and the wind caught it. He sat by the rudder and steered with care. He did not sleep, but watched the stars overhead. The Pleiades and the Bear shone brightly in the night sky. The raft moved smoothly over the dark ocean. For many days, he sailed in peace. The sea was calm, and the wind was constant. Finally, he saw the shadowy outline of mountains ahead. It was the land of the Phaeacians, rising like a shield. But the mood of the sea began to change. The winds shifted and the waves grew larger. Clouds gathered to hide the sun and the stars. The water became active and tossed the raft about. Ulysses held on, though the journey became difficult. The sails grew heavy with the spray of the sea. A great wave rose up and swept over the deck. The mast snapped, and the raft began to break apart. Ulysses found himself in the water. He swam with strong, steady strokes. He found a piece of the raft and held on tight. The winds pushed him this way and that. A gentle sea spirit saw him in the water. She took the form of a bird and landed on the timber. She spoke kind words of encouragement to him. She gave him a veil to wrap around his chest. She told him it would keep him safe from harm. He wrapped the veil around him and felt a new strength. The raft finally drifted apart in the swell. Ulysses swam forward, trusting the veil. The wind calmed down, and the sea became smooth again. For 2 days and nights, he floated on the swell. The water rocked him like a cradle. On the 3rd morning, the wind fell completely silent. The sea was calm and flat. Ulysses lifted his head and saw the land very near. He felt a deep sense of relief and joy. He swam toward the shore with renewed hope. The coast was rocky, and the surf was loud. He looked for a safe place to rest his feet. He swam along the shore until he felt a fresh current. It was the mouth of a quiet river flowing into the sea. He prayed silently to the spirit of the river. The river heard him and smoothed its waters. The current slowed, welcoming the weary traveler. Ulysses swam into the calm bay and touched the earth. He climbed onto the bank among the reeds. He was tired, but he was safe on dry land. He kissed the ground in gratitude. The air by the river was cool as evening approached. He needed a warm place to sleep for the night. He walked up a small hill to a wooded area. He found 2 olive trees growing from one trunk. Their branches were tangled together closely. They made a perfect roof against the wind and dew. Beneath them lay a deep, soft bed of fallen leaves. Ulysses smiled to see such a comfortable bed. He lay down in the middle of the leaves. He covered himself up like a glowing coal in ashes. The leaves were warm and smelled of the earth. A sweet and heavy sleep fell upon his eyes. All his weariness faded away into the quiet night. He slept soundly, safe and hidden in the wood. Book 6. The meeting between Nausicaa and Ulysses. Under the quiet blanket of night, Ulysses slept deep and sound. Far away, in the land of the Phaeacians, the city lay silent and safe. The high walls protected the sleeping houses. A gentle spirit, the wise Minerva, drifted through the streets like a soft breeze. She entered the peaceful room of the Princess Nausicaa. The room was still, filled with the hush of slumber. Minerva whispered a sweet dream into the sleeping girl's ear. "Tomorrow is a lovely day for the river," the dream suggested softly. "Let us wash the fine linens in the fresh water." It was a promise of a bright, happy morning to come. Minerva then faded away, returning to the everlasting sunshine of the gods. There, the light is always golden, and the wind never blows too cold. The morning sun rose with a gentle glow, waking Nausicaa. She remembered her pleasant dream and when to find her parents. Her mother sat by the warm hearth. Soft purple wool spun rhythmically through her fingers. Her father was preparing for his day, calm and kind. "Father," she asked with a smile, "may I take the wagon to the river today? I wish to wash our linens in the clear stream." She spoke of clean clothes and fresh air. Her father smiled, his eyes full of love for his daughter. "You shall have the wagon and the mules," he said gently. "Go and enjoy the day." The servants brought the wagon around. They harnessed the strong, patient mules. Nausicaa brought the soft clothes down and placed them in the cart. Her mother packed a basket with sweet fruit and bread. She added a flask of wine and smooth oil for their skin. Nausicaa climbed up and held the reins loosely. The mules began to walk, their hooves making a steady, rhythmic sound on the road. Click-clack, click-clack, they went through the countryside. The sun was warm and the air was sweet. They arrived at the river, where the water was crystal clear. The stream flowed endlessly, cool and pure. They unharnessed the mules and let them graze on the sweet grass nearby. The girls took the clothes to the water's edge. They dipped the fabric into the current, washing it with care. The water rippled over smooth stones. It was soothing work, done with laughter and light hearts. When the linens were clean, they laid them on the warm pebbles. The sun shone down, drying the cloth in the gentle breeze. After their work, they bathed in the cool river. They smoothed the golden oil onto their skin. Then, they sat on the riverbank to share their picnic. They ate the sweet food and watched the clouds drift by. When the meal was done, they played a game with a ball. They tossed it back and forth, singing a soft melody. Nausicaa stood tall and lovely, like a flower in a meadow. She was happy, surrounded by her friends in the sunlight. The ball splashed gently into the deep water. The sound woke Ulysses from his long, healing sleep. He sat up in his bed of soft leaves. He wondered where he was, but he felt no fear. He heard the voices of the maidens, sweet as would nymphs. "I will ask them for help," he thought calmly. He stepped out from the bushes, holding a leafy branch. He was a weary traveler, worn by the sea, but his eyes were kind. The other girls stepped back, surprised by the stranger. But Nausicaa stood still, for her heart was filled with courage. She looked at him with gentle eyes. Ulysses spoke to her with a voice like honey. "Peace be with you," he said softly. "Are you a spirit of this river, or a lady of this land? You are as beautiful as a young palm tree I once saw. It grew tall and straight near an ancient altar. I have traveled far, and the sea has been rough. Please, show me the way to your town, and perhaps you have a rap for a weary man. May the heavens grant you a peaceful home and a happy heart." Nausicaa smiled at his gentle words. "Stranger, you seem wise and kind," she replied. "We are the Phaeacians, and this is a safe land. I will show you the way, and you shall have clothing." She called to her friends, her voice calm and reassuring. "Do not worry," she said. "This man is a guest, and guests are dear to us. Give him food and drink, and show him a sheltered place to bathe." The maidens returned, their hesitation gone. They gave Ulysses a cloak and a tunic. They offered him the smooth oil. Ulysses went to a quiet spot in the river. He washed away the salt of the sea. The cool water refreshed his tired limbs. He anointed himself and put on the fresh clothes. He felt new again, his strength returning like the tide. He sat down, looking handsome and noble in the afternoon light. Nausicaa watched him and whispered to her friends. "The gods have sent this man to us," she said. "He looks like one who belongs in our peaceful city." They offered him food, and he ate with gratitude. The sun began to dip lower in the sky. It was time to return home. Nausicaa yoked the mules to the wagon. She folded the dry, crisp linens. "Come, friend," she said to Ulysses. "Walk with us toward the city. We will go through the fields and farms. When we reach the town, you will see a high wall. You will see our ships resting by the road. We are a people of the sea, and we live in peace. There is a grove of poplar trees near the road," she continued. "A clear spring bubbles there, surrounded by a meadow. Rest there for a little while. Let the evening settle over the land. Then, come into the city and find my father's house. It is easy to find. My mother sits by the fire, spinning her purple wool. Go to her, and she will welcome you." She urged the mules forward gently. The wagon wheels turned, rolling toward home. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. They reached the sacred grove of poplars. Ulysses sat down in the soft grass. The leaves rustled above him in the twilight. He breathed in the cool evening air. "Thank you," he whispered to the listening night. He felt safe, ready to find rest in the house of friends. Book 7. Reception of Ulysses at the palace of King Alcinous. Ulysses waited in the quiet grove, breathing in the evening air. The girl rode her cart toward the soft lights of the town. She reached her father's home as the twilight deepened. Her brothers welcomed her with gentle smiles. They unhitched the mules and carried the linens inside. In her room, a warm fire crackled in the hearth. The old nurse brought a tray of supper. The room was cozy and safe against the coming night. Ulysses rose to walk toward the city. A soft mist wrapped around him like a protective blanket. It held him in a safe, quiet cloud. A gentle spirit appeared to guide his steps. She led him through the silent streets. The ships in the harbor bobbed on calm water. The walls of the city stood tall and strong. Ulysses admired the peaceful harbor as he walked. They arrived at the great house of the king. The palace glowed like the moon in the night sky. The walls shone with a soft, bronze light. Doors of gold opened silently on silver pillars. Silver statues stood watch with eternal patience. Inside, the air was warm and welcoming. The women of the house wove fine fabrics by the fire. Their hands moved like leaves fluttering in a gentle breeze. Beyond the courtyard lay a magnificent garden. Trees bowed low with pears and pomegranates. The air smelled sweet with ripe figs and apples. A soft breeze moved through the leaves. Pear grew upon pear, and apple upon apple. It was a place where winter never came. Two clear streams flowed gently through the grass. Flowers bloomed in colors of the sunset. The garden was a sanctuary of endless peace. Ulysses stepped across the bronze threshold. He moved through the hall, still wrapped in the mist. He approached the queen, who sat by the fire. The mist faded away, revealing him to the room. The room went quiet, but the silence was kind. He spoke with a low, humble voice. He asked only for safe passage to his home. Then he sat quietly by the warmth of the hearth. The room was peaceful and still. An elder spoke with wise and gentle words. The king stood and took Ulysses by the hand. He led the traveler to a comfortable seat. Servants poured fresh water for his hands from a golden ewer. They brought bread and fruit on a clean table. Ulysses ate and drank in the comforting light. The king called for a cup of wine to be mixed. They poured a drop for the gods, giving thanks. The king spoke to his people gently. He promised to help the traveler return home. He spoke of ships that glided like thoughts. The journey would be smooth and without toil. Ulysses felt a great weight lift from his heart. The king assured him he would be safe. Even the gods sometimes visited their table, he said. Ulysses smiled, but shook his head gently. He explained he was just a man who had traveled far. He only wished to see his own home again. The queen asked about the clothes he wore. She recognized the fine weaving of her own house. Ulysses spoke softly of his long journey. He told of the far-off island where he had rested. He spoke of the goddess who had cared for him. For 7 years, he had lived in her quiet gardens. He told of drifting on the wide, blue ocean. The stars had guided his path on a raft. The waves had carried him to their shores. He spoke of the river where he found shelter. He described sleeping deep within a pile of leaves. It was a sleep of total peace and healing. He told of waking to see the princess playing by the water. He praised her kindness and her gentle heart. The king listened and nodded with understanding. He promised a ship for the morrow. The vessel would carry Ulysses while he slept. It would sail over calm seas to his homeland. The rowers would guide him with ease and grace. Ulysses closed his eyes for a moment, grateful. He prayed silently that these words would come true. The queen signaled to her maids. They prepared a soft bed in the quiet gatehouse. They spread thick purple rugs and warm wool cloaks. Torches cast a golden glow as they led him there. "Rest now, stranger," they whispered softly. Ulysses lay down on the soft bedding. His heart was full of hope and gratitude. The king and queen retired to their inner chambers. The palace fell silent under the stars. Ulysses closed his eyes and drifted into deep slumber. Book 8. Banquet in the House of Alcinous, The Games. The morning light spread softly across the sky. It was a gentle, rosy dawn that welcomed the day. King Alcinous and his guest rose from their rest. They walked slowly to the gathering place near the ships. The air was fresh and cool. They sat together on smooth, polished stones. People from the town began to arrive quietly. They moved with a calm purpose, gathering to see the traveler. The square filled with a friendly murmur of voices. Everyone looked with kindness upon the stranger. He stood tall and strong, bathed in the morning glow. He seemed like a man of great nobility. The king spoke to the gathered crowd. His voice was warm and welcoming. He told them of the stranger who needed to go home. He asked for a ship to be prepared for the journey. 52 young men were chosen for the crew. They went down to the shore where the water lapped gently. They prepared the ship, raising the white sails. The sails caught the soft breeze. Everything was made ready for a safe voyage. The crowd then moved to the king's palace. It was time for a shared meal and rest. The halls filled with the comfort of good company. A feast was laid out on long tables. The scent of roasted meats and fresh bread filled the air. A blind singer named Demodocus was led into the room. He carried a silver harp in his hands. A servant guided him to a comfortable chair. The harp was hung within his reach. A basket of food and a cup of wine were placed nearby. The singer touched the strings of his harp. A sweet, rippling melody floated through the hall. He sang of heroes and distant times. The music was beautiful and soothing. The traveler listened, and his heart was moved. He drew his purple cloak over his face. Quiet tears came to his eyes as he remembered the past. He wiped them away before anyone could see. He poured a little wine as an offering to the gods. The music paused, and the room was peaceful. After the meal, the king suggested they go outside. The sun was high and bright upon the grass. It was time for games and gentle sport. The people followed, walking easily to the green fields. Young men prepared to show their speed and grace. They ran races, their feet kicking up soft dust. They moved like the wind across the plain. Others wrestled, testing their strength in play. They jumped and threw heavy stones with great skill. The crowd watched with happy smiles. One young man looked at the traveler. He asked if the guest would like to join the games. He spoke of the joy of movement and strength. The traveler smiled, but shook his head at first. He felt the weight of his long, weary journey. Another young man spoke up, encouraging him. The traveler stood, his dignity clear to all. He picked up a heavy disc, smooth and round. It was heavier than the ones the others used. With a calm, fluid motion, he swung his arm. The disc flew through the air with a low hum. It sailed far beyond all the other marks. It landed softly in the distant grass. The crowd stood in quiet wonder at his strength. The traveler spoke gently to the young men. He offered to match them in running or boxing. He spoke of his skill with the bow and arrow. He remembered days when he was young and rested. The king listened and nodded with respect. He praised the traveler's grace and power. He told of his own people's love for dance and song. He called for the dancers to take the floor. The singer brought his harp once more. Young men began to dance in a rhythmic circle. Their feet tapped a steady, lulling beat on the earth. The music wove a story of the gods above. It was a tale of love and clever traps. The notes rose and fell like the tides. The traveler watched the dancers with delight. He admired the lightness of their steps. The afternoon passed in a haze of music and movement. Two dancers threw a red ball high into the blue sky. They caught it with ease, bending like reeds in the wind. The sun began to dip lower, painting the sky gold. The king called for gifts to honor their guest. The leaders of the town brought beautiful things. They brought soft cloaks and talents of fine gold. The young man who had spoken earlier brought a sword. It was silver and bronze, a gift of friendship. He wished the traveler a safe and happy return. The traveler accepted the sword with a grateful heart. He wished the young man a long and peaceful life. The shadows grew long as evening approached. They returned to the warmth of the palace. The gifts were placed safely in a chest. The queen commanded her maids to prepare a bath. They placed a large cauldron over a crackling fire. The water warmed slowly in the glowing heat. The traveler bathed, washing away the salt of the sea. He felt the tension leave his tired muscles. He dressed in fresh, clean clothes that smelled of air. He walked back to the hall, feeling renewed. The king's daughter stood by a tall pillar. She looked at him with kind eyes. She asked him to remember her when he reached home. He promised to keep her in his heart always. He sat beside the king as the candles were lit. The light flickered softly on the walls. The feast continued in a hushed and cozy atmosphere. The singer began another tale of the Great War. He sang of the wooden horse and the hidden men. He sang of victories won long ago. The traveler listened, and the memories washed over him. His heart ached with a deep, quiet sadness. He wept silently, like a soft rain falling. The king noticed his guest's sorrow. He saw the heavy sighs and the bowed head. He raised a hand to stop the music. The harp fell silent, leaving only the sound of the fire. The king spoke gently to his people. He said it was time for the singing to cease. He wanted his guest to find comfort, not sorrow. The king turned to the traveler with a soft gaze. He asked him to set aside his secrets. He asked for his name and the name of his home. He spoke of the ships that knew the way through the mist. He asked where the traveler had wandered. The room was still, waiting for the story. The night was calm and full of stars. The traveler took a breath, ready to speak. He prepared to share the tale of his long journey. Book 9. Ulysses declares himself and begins his story. The Cicons, Lotophagi, and Cyclopes. The great hall was warm and filled with golden light. King Alcinous sat comfortably with his guests. They listened to the gentle strumming of the bard's harp. The tables were laden with fresh bread and sweet fruit. A sense of peace filled the room. The traveler, Ulysses, looked around with a grateful heart. It was a beautiful sight to see people resting together. The king asked him to share his story. Ulysses nodded slowly, his mind drifting back to his home. He spoke of Ithaca, his beloved island. He described the high mountain covered in green forests. The leaves there whispered in the wind. He spoke of the nearby islands resting on the horizon. The sun sets there in a bath of warm color. Ithaca is a rugged place, but full of love. It is where his parents and his memories reside. No matter how far he traveled, his heart remained there. He began to tell of his long journey across the sea. The wind had guided their wooden ships from the distant city. They sailed over the rolling waves. They stopped briefly at a coastal town. The men gathered supplies and water. But soon, the north wind blew strong and cold. The sky turned a soft, misty gray. The sails were lowered to protect the ships. For 2 days, they drifted on the heaving water. They waited for the storm to pass. On the third morning, the sun returned. The masts were raised, and the white sails caught the breeze. The currents pushed them gently past the cape. For 9 days, they floated on the open ocean. On the 10th day, they reached a quiet shore. This was the land of the lotus eaters. The air smelled of sweet flowers and honey. The crew stepped onto the sand to drink fresh water. The people of this land were gentle and slow. They offered the travelers the delicious lotus flower. The fruit was sweet and very calming. Those who ate it felt a heavy, pleasant sleepiness. They forgot their worries. They only wanted to rest in the tall grass. They did not want to leave this peaceful garden. Ulysses spoke softly to his friends. He reminded them of their own beds back home. He guided them gently back to the ships. They sat at the benches, still yawning. The oars dipped silently into the gray sea. They sailed on through the quiet night. Soon they arrived at the land of the Cyclopes. These giants lived simple lives in the hills. They did not plant crops or hold meetings. They lived in deep caves on the high peaks. Near their land lay a small, uninhabited island. It was a wild, green place. Herds of wild goats grazed in the meadows. The grass was soft and luscious. The ships glided into a dark harbor. The mist was thick and comforting. The moon hid behind a cloud. The vessels touched the sand without a sound. The crew slept on the beach until the morning. When the rosy-fingered dawn appeared, the world woke up. Birds sang in the trees. The men walked through the forest. They admired the untouched beauty of the island. They gathered food and feasted by the water. Across the bay, they saw smoke rising. It came from the caves of the Cyclopes. They heard the faint bleating of sheep. The sun went down, and the stars came out. The next morning, Ulysses called his men. He wanted to meet the neighbors. He hoped they would be kind. He took his own ship and 12 brave men. They rowed across the calm water. They climbed a path to a large cave high in the cliff. Laurel trees grew around the entrance. Inside, the air smelled of milk and clean hay. Baskets were filled with fresh cheeses. Lambs and kids slept in their warm pens. The owner of the cave was not home. He was out shepherding his flock. Ulysses waited patiently. He brought a skin of sweet, dark wine as a gift. In the evening, The giant returned. He was huge, like a mountain peak. He threw a bundle of wood on the floor. The men hid in the shadows, feeling very small. The giant drove his flock into the cave. He rolled a massive stone in front of the door. It was too heavy for any wagon to move. The cave was sealed tight for the night. The giant sat down to milk his ewes. He worked with a steady rhythm. He lit a fire, casting long shadows on the walls. Then he saw the travelers. His voice was deep like rolling thunder. He asked who they were. Ulysses spoke with polite and careful words. He explained they were on their way home. He asked for hospitality in the name of the gods. The giant was not interested in guests. He was a solitary creature. He grumbled and frowned. Ulysses saw that the giant was weary. He offered a bowl of the sweet wine. The giant drank it and smiled. The wine was rich and soothing like nectar. He asked for another bowl, and then a third. The warmth of the wine made the giant sleepy. He asked Ulysses for his name. Ulysses answered with a clever riddle. He said his name was Nomen. The giant laughed softly. He promised to eat Nomen last, which was a strange joke. Then, the giant lay back on the ground. His heavy head sank down. A deep sleep overtook him. He began to snore, the sound echoing off the stone. Ulysses knew they had to act to escape. He found a beam of olive wood and heated it in the fire until it glowed. With the help of his men, he plunged the wood into the giant's single eye, taking his sight. The giant roared in the darkness, but the heavy stone door kept him trapped. He called out for help, shouting that Nomen was hurting him. His neighbors, hearing only that no man was hurting him, went back to sleep. Ulysses quieted his men. He tied the sheep together in groups of 3. He told his men to hide underneath the warm bellies. They held on to the soft fleece. Ulysses curled up under the largest ram. They waited in the darkness until dawn. When the morning light turned the sky pink, the sheep woke up. They bleated, eager for the pasture. The blind giant rolled the heavy stone away. He sat by the door, feeling the backs of the sheep. He checked them as they walked out. He did not feel the men hidden beneath. The sheep walked slowly into the fresh air. Ulysses and his men were carried out of the cave. They held their breath. Once they were far enough away, they let go. They stood up in the tall grass. They untied the animals and hurried to the shore. They herded the flock onto the ship. The rest of the crew welcomed them with relief. They pushed the ship into the water. Ulysses called out to the giant from the deck. The giant heard him and was angry. He threw a rock into the sea, but it missed. The splash pushed the ship further out. Ulysses called out his true name. He wanted the giant to know who had outsmarted him. The giant prayed to the sea god, his father, but the ship moved steadily away. The men rowed with a steady rhythm. The oars splashed in the blue water. They reached the island where the other ships waited. They shared a meal on the beach as the sun set. They were tired but safe. When the dawn returned, they set sail once more. The wind filled the sails. They moved across the gray sea, their hearts full of hope for home. Book 10, Aeolus, the Lestrigones, Circe. The ship glided over the water toward a floating island. It was the home of Aeolus, the keeper of the winds. He lived there in comfort with his family. The days were filled with warm meals and soft music. Aeolus welcomed the travelers and let them rest for a month. When it was time to leave, he gave the captain a gift. It was a leather bag tied tight with a silver string. Inside were the blustery winds, kept safe and quiet. Only the gentle west wind was left free to guide them. The ship sailed smoothly for 9 peaceful days and nights. The shores of their home finally appeared on the horizon. The captain, tired from steering, fell into a deep sleep. The crew became curious about the silver-tied bag. They thought it held gold or silver treasures. Quietly, they untied the string to look inside. The winds escaped and danced across the waves. The ship drifted back, far from the familiar shore. They returned to the floating island, but could not stay. The ship sailed on, carried by the currents of the sea. They traveled for 6 days until they saw high cliffs. It was a land where the night was as bright as day. The water in the harbor was calm and still as glass. Tall beings walked the hills, like shadows against the sky. The travelers sensed it was time to move on quickly. They sailed away from the cliffs into the open ocean. Only one ship remained to continue the long journey. They came to a wooded island, rich with green trees. The air was still and the harbor was safe. They rested on the warm sand for 2 quiet days. The captain climbed a hill to look over the land. He saw smoke rising from a house deep in the woods. He returned to the shore to bring food to his men. They ate by the water and watched the sun go down. Morning brought a rosy light to the eastern sky. The captain divided the men into 2 groups. One group went into the forest to explore. They found a smooth stone house in a sunlit clearing. Wolves and lions lay on the grass, tame and gentle. The great beasts wagged their tails like friendly dogs. A sweet voice sang from inside the house. The lady of the house, Circe, invited the men inside. She gave them a drink of honey and wine, but the drink held a soft enchantment. The men took on the shape of swine. They rested in the pen, their minds still aware. One man ran back to the ship to tell the tale. The captain took his sword and went to find them. A golden youth met him on the quiet forest path. It was a messenger of the gods, offering help. He gave the captain a white flower with a black root. It was a charm to keep his mind safe and clear. The captain reached the house and met the lady Circe. He drank her wine, but remained unchanged by the spell. Circe marveled at his quiet strength. She promised to do him no harm. She used her wand to turn the men back to human form. They looked younger and taller than they had before. Tears of relief fell as the friends embraced. Circe invited them all to stay and rest. They lived in the stone house for a full year. They feasted and slept, healing their weary hearts. The seasons turned slowly in the woods. The men began to think of their distant home. The captain asked Circe for the path to their country. She told him of a journey to the edge of the world. They must visit the land of shadows to ask the way. A wise spirit there would tell them how to sail. The north wind would guide their ship across the ocean. The crew prepared the vessel with quiet hands. They raised the white sails to catch the breeze. The ship moved gently away from the island. They sailed toward the horizon, guided by the stars. Book 11. The Visit to the Dead. The ship glided softly over the darker waves. The sails caught a gentle breeze sent by the goddess Circe. The crew sat quietly at their places. The vessel moved with the rhythm of the sea. The sun began to dip below the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the water. They reached the deep, calm current of the great river Oceanus. Here, the mist hung low and thick. The light was dim and gray, like a never-ending evening. They guided the ship onto the soft sands of a silent shore. Odysseus stepped out into the hush of the strange land. He walked to a quiet spot near the water's edge. He prepared a gentle offering for the spirits of the place. He poured sweet milk and golden honey into the earth. He added mellow wine and clear water. He sprinkled white barley over the ground. He spoke soft words of promise to those who had passed on. He promised them peace and remembrance when he returned home. The air grew cool and still. From the shadows, the drifting forms of spirits appeared. They did not scream or shout. They floated like mist in the moonlight. They gathered around the offering in a calm circle. Odysseus sat quietly. waiting for the wise sage he had come to see. The first shadow to step forward was Elpenor, a friend from the journey. He seemed weary but calm. He spoke to Odysseus in a whisper. He asked to be remembered. He wished for a simple mound by the sea. He wanted his, or planted there, a sign of his travels. Odysseus nodded slowly. He promised to honor his friend's wish. Elpenor faded back into the gray mist, comforted. Odysseus sat by the offering, his sword resting in its sheath. He waited with patience. Then, the spirit of his mother, Anticlea, appeared. Her face was pale but kind. Odysseus felt a tug at his heart. He longed to speak with her, but he waited for the sage first. Tiresias, the ancient prophet, emerged from the gloom. He held a golden staff in his hand. He looked at Odysseus with knowing eyes. He spoke of the voyage ahead. He told of the deep blue sea and the journey home. He warned Odysseus to be careful on the island of the sun. He spoke of the cattle grazing in peace. If they were left unharmed, the return would be safe. He spoke of a quiet old age, far in the future. He said peace would come from the sea, gentle as a mist. The prophet finished his words and drifted away. Odysseus remained. Now his mother came closer. She drank from the offering and knew him. She spoke softly, her voice like a breeze. She asked how he had come to this dim place. She asked about his long journey. Odysseus told her he was still wandering. He asked about his home. He asked about his father and his wife. His mother answered with gentle sorrow. She told him his wife waited patiently. She told him his son was growing strong. She spoke of his father, who slept on leaves in the vineyard. She said his father missed him dearly. She told him that she, too, had missed him until her end. Odysseus tried to hold her. He reached out 3 times. His arms passed through her mist-like form. She was like a shadow or a dream. She told him to return to the light. She told him to remember this meeting. Then came many other gentle spirits. They were the queens and daughters of old times. They moved slowly, one by one. Each told her story in a whisper. Odysseus listened to the tales of the past. He heard of rivers and gods. He heard of ancient kings and their lines. The night stretched on, timeless and deep. Odysseus paused in his telling. The listeners in the great hall sat in silence. The firelight flickered softly. The queen spoke, praising the traveler. The king asked him to stay a little longer. He wanted to hear more of the tale. The night was calm and long. Odysseus continued his story. He spoke of meeting the great king Agamemnon. The king's spirit was sad but calm. He spoke of his family. He warned Odysseus to be wise when he returned home. He asked for news of his own son. Odysseus could not give him an answer. They stood together for a moment, 2 kings in the shadows. Then the spirit of Achilles approached. He walked with his friend Patroclus. Achilles asked about the world above. He asked about his son. Odysseus told him of his son's bravery. He told him the boy was strong and wise. Achilles smiled, a rare brightness in the gloom. He walked away across the fields of flowers, proud and content. Other spirits stood nearby. Ajax stood silently in the distance. Odysseus spoke kind words to him. He wished for peace between them. Ajax did not speak, but turned slowly away. Odysseus saw the great judge Minos seated on a throne. He saw the hunter Orion with his club. He saw figures in the distance, performing eternal tasks. They moved in a rhythm that never changed. The vastness of the underworld stretched out around them. The air grew heavy. The number of drifting shadows increased. A soft sound rose like the wind in the trees. Odysseus felt it was time to leave. He walked back to the shore. He climbed aboard his ship. The crew sat ready at the oars. The current of the great river caught the hull. They drifted away from the land of mist. The ship moved effortlessly. First they rowed, and then a fair wind carried them. They sailed back toward the open sea and the light of the living world. Book 12. The Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, the Cattle of the Sun. The ship drifted gently from the river waters into the open sea. The waves were small and rhythmic against the wooden hull. They reached the island of the dawn, where the sun rises soft and warm. The crew pulled the ship onto the smooth white sands. They lay down on the beach and slept under the quiet stars. When the rosy light of morning touched the sky, the day began. The air was fresh and filled with the scent of the sea. They gathered wood from the forest to honor their lost friend. It was a quiet ceremony, filled with peace and memory. A stone was placed to mark the spot on the high headland. The lady of the island, Circe, came down to the shore. She brought bread, sweetmeat, and wine for the journey. She spoke in a low, melodious voice. She told Ulysses of the path that lay ahead. She spoke of the calm days and the starry nights to come. She promised to guide them so they would be safe from harm. The men feasted and rested until the sun dipped below the horizon. As darkness fell, they slept by the ship, lulled by the ocean. Circe took Ulysses by the hand, and they sat apart. She told him of the wonders he would see. She spoke of the sirens who sing from a flowery meadow. She told him how to listen safely to their enchanting song. She described the tall rocks and the deep, swirling waters. She told him of the golden cattle grazing on a sunny isle. Her voice was steady and wise, calming his mind. When the golden dawn returned, the men prepared to leave. The gentle goddess sent a favorable wind to fill their sails. The ship moved effortlessly across the gray water. Ulysses gathered his men and spoke softly to them. He told them of the song they would soon hear. The wind died down, and the sea became as smooth as glass. The men lowered the sails and took up their oars. The white foam curled gently around the blades. Ulysses prepared the soft wax to protect their ears. The men bound him loosely to the mast so he could listen. The ship glided near the green shore of the Sirens. A beautiful melody drifted over the water, sweet and calling. The voices sang of knowledge and peace. Ulysses listened, his heart filled with the lovely sound. The ship passed on, and the song faded into the distance. The silence of the sea returned, vast and comforting. Soon, a mist rose from the water ahead. The sound of deep water moving reached their ears. The men held their oars, unsure of the path. Ulysses walked among them, speaking words of courage. He guided the helmsman to steer close to the tall cliffs. They entered a narrow passage of water. On one side, the cliffs reached high into the clouds. On the other, the water swirled in a slow, deep rhythm. The sea rose and fell like a great breathing chest. Mist sprayed softly over the deck. They moved past the danger, the ship rocking gently. The dark rocks faded behind them as they sailed on. They arrived at a beautiful, sunny island. Green meadows stretched out, filled with grazing sheep and cattle. The animals belonged to the sun, and they were peaceful. The ship came to rest in a quiet harbor near fresh water. The men were tired and longed for rest. They cooked their supper on the shore as the stars came out. The night was calm, and sleep came easily to them all. For a month, the winds held them on this island. They rested and watched the clouds drift by. The provisions on the ship slowly ran low. Ulysses went inland to pray in a sheltered valley. The peace of the island lulled him into a deep slumber. While he slept, the men made a choice to eat. They feasted on the cattle under the high sun. It was a moment of plenty, but the time to leave had come. The winds shifted, and they set sail once more. The island of the sun disappeared below the horizon. The sky turned a deep, slate gray. A strong wind rose from the west, singing in the rigging. The sea grew rougher, tossing the ship like a toy. The mast gave way, and the ship could no longer hold together. The structure came apart in the powerful waves. The men were separated in the churning water. Ulysses found two timbers lashed together. He held on as the storm passed and the waters calmed. The wind shifted again, pushing him gently south. He drifted alone under the vast, open sky. The sun warmed him by day, and the moon watched by night. He floated past the swirling waters, safe on his raft. For 9 days, the sea cradled him. On the 10th night, he drifted to a new shore. It was the island of Ogygia, a place of soft moss and trees. Here, the goddess Calypso welcomed him from the sea. He found rest at last, safe from the long voyage. Book 13. Ulysses leaves Scheria and returns to Ithaca. The great hall fell silent. Everyone listened to the story with warm hearts. King Alcinous spoke gently to his guest. He promised a safe journey home for the weary traveler. The king asked his friends to bring more gifts. They brought bronze and soft fabrics for Odysseus to take with him. Everyone agreed and went to their homes to rest. When the morning sky turned a soft, rosy pink, they returned. They carried their gifts to the waiting ship. The king ensured everything was stowed away safely. They shared a meal together in the palace. A bard sang calm songs that pleased them all. Odysseus watched the sun, waiting for the evening. He was like a farmer waiting for rest after a long day. He longed to see the sun set so he could travel. When the light faded, Odysseus spoke to the king. He thanked them for their kindness and the escort home. He wished peace upon their house and their people. He hoped to find his own family safe and well. The king ordered wine to be poured for a gentle toast. They made offerings to the heavens, wishing the traveler well. Odysseus placed a cup in the queen's hands. He wished her happiness through all her days. He left the hall and walked to the shore. Maids followed with warm clothes and food for the journey. The crew prepared a soft bed of rugs and linen on the deck. Odysseus laid down in the quiet stern of the ship. As the ropes were untied, a deep sleep overtook him. It was a sweet, dreamless slumber, calm and still. The ship moved smoothly across the water. It glided effortlessly, like a bird on the wind. The dark blue waves parted gently before the prow. The ship carried the sleeping man safely through the night. He forgot all his past worries and rested in peace. The brightest star of morning rose in the sky. It signaled the coming of the dawn. The ship approached the island of Ithaca. There was a quiet harbor sheltered by 2 cliffs. The water inside was calm and still. An olive tree grew near the head of the cove. Nearby was a cool, shadowy cave sacred to the water nymphs. Inside were stone bowls and clear flowing water. It was a peaceful place where bees hummed softly. The ship glided onto the sandy beach. The crew lifted the sleeping Odysseus with great care. They laid him on the sand, wrapped in his soft linen sheet. They placed his gifts by the trunk of the olive tree. They left them off the path to keep them safe. Then the crew quietly sailed for home. In the deep waters, the sea god watched them go. He spoke to the king of the skies about the travelers. He wished to leave a mark so they would respect the sea. The Sky King suggested a gentle lesson. As the ship neared its home, it stopped moving. It slowly turned into stone, rooted in the water. It became a quiet monument near the harbor. The people on the shore watched in wonder. They gathered to offer prayers to the sea, promising respect. Back on the sandy shore of Ithaca, Odysseus stirred. He woke from his long sleep. A soft mist covered the land, sent to keep him safe. He looked around, but did not recognize the hills. The path and the trees seemed different in the fog. He felt confused and lonely. He worried that he was lost once again. He counted his treasures and found them all safe. He walked slowly by the rhythm of the waves. A young shepherd appeared from the mist. The figure looked gentle and noble. It was the goddess Athena, disguised in soft robes. Odysseus was glad to see a friendly face. He asked where he was and who lived there. The shepherd spoke in a soothing voice. She told him this land was known far and wide. It was a land of goats and cattle, rain and dew. She whispered the name of the land, Ithaca. Odysseus felt a warm glow of joy in his heart. He was truly home at last. He spoke carefully, hiding his true name for safety. He told a story of travel and distant lands. Athena smiled and her form shimmered. She became a tall, wise woman with a kind face. She reached out and touched his hand. She told him she had watched over him for a long time. She explained that she was there to help him. "You are home," she said softly. "We will hide your treasures safely in the cave." She showed him the way to the sacred grotto. They placed the gold and bronze in the cool shadows. Athena placed a stone to guard the entrance. They sat together by the olive tree to talk. She told him he must be patient a little longer. He needed to reclaim his home with care and wisdom. Odysseus asked for her guidance and strength. He wanted to bring peace back to his house. Athena promised to stand beside him. She told him she would change his appearance. This disguise would keep him safe from those who would harm him. She touched him with her wand. His skin became weathered like an old traveler. His fine clothes turned into humble, worn garments. He looked like a man who had walked many miles. She gave him a staff to lean on. She told him to go to the forest. He was to find the swineherd who cared for his pigs. The swineherd was a loyal and kind man. "Stay with him," she said gently. "Rest there and listen." Athena said she would go to fetch his son. His son was visiting friends, safe and well. The two parted ways in the quiet morning light. Odysseus began his walk into the peaceful woods. Book 14. Ulysses in the hut with Eumaeus. The traveler left the shore and found a quiet path. He walked slowly through the wooded hills. The air was fresh and smelled of pine. He climbed until he reached the high crest of the mountain. Here lived the faithful herdsman, Eumaeus. The herdsman sat peacefully in front of his sturdy hut. He had built the walls with care, stone by smooth stone. It was a safe haven, surrounded by a strong fence. Inside, the animals rested in deep, comfortable straw. The day was calm and the light was golden. The herdsman's dogs lifted their heads as the traveler approached. They were watchful guardians of the flock. With a gentle word, the herdsman quieted them. He rose to welcome the visitor with open hands. "Come inside, friend," he said softly. "Rest your weary legs and share my food." He led the traveler into the cozy hut. On the floor, he spread a thick bed of soft rushes. Over this, he laid a warm, shaggy skin for comfort. The traveler smiled, grateful for such kindness. "May the stars shine brightly on you," the traveler said. "You welcome a stranger as if he were kin." The herdsman poured sweet wine into a wooden cup. "All strangers are under the care of the heavens," he replied. "I give what little I have with a glad heart." He spoke then of his lost master, a king of old. His voice was low and filled with fond memories. He remembered a master who was kind and just. The traveler listened quietly, hiding his true name. He ate the warm food and drank the wine. The firelight cast gentle shadows on the walls. Outside, the evening deepened into night. The herdsman prepared a savory meal for them both. They ate in companionable silence. The herdsman shared the best portions, generous and fair. They honored the gods with a small offering. Peace settled over the little hut. The traveler then began to tell a tale of his own. He spoke of wandering across the vast, blue sea. He told of distant lands and long voyages. He described ships sailing under the moon. He spoke of storms that passed and suns that rose. It was a long story of endurance and hope. The herdsman listened, charmed by the rhythmic words. He did not know he spoke to his own king. He simply heard the voice of a man who had seen much. The night grew darker and a cool wind rose. Rain began to tap gently on the roof. The air inside the hut drifted toward a chill. The traveler spoke of cold nights on the open water. He hinted gently that the night air was biting. The herdsman understood the need for warmth. He stood up and found a heavy, woolen cloak. It was thick and soft, perfect for a winter night. He placed it over the traveler with care. "Sleep now," the herdsman said kindly. "Tomorrow brings a new day." The herdsman made a soft bed near the fire. He laid down sheepskins and goatskins. The traveler lay down, wrapped in the warm cloak. His eyes closed, heavy with rest. The young men slept soundly nearby. But the faithful herdsman had one more duty. He took his own thick mantle and stepped outside. He went to watch over his flock in the quiet dark. Under the shelter of a great rock, the animals slept. The herdsman stood guard, peaceful and vigilant. The mountain was silent, and all was safe. Book 15. Minerva summons Telemachus from Lacedaemon. He meets with Theoclymenus at Pylos and brings him to Ithaca. On landing, he goes to the hut of Eumaeus. The night was deep and quiet over the fair city of Lacedaemon. The stars shone brightly above the sleeping world. In the courtyard of the great house, young Telemachus rested. The air was cool and still. A gentle presence came to him in the silence. It was Minerva, the wise guardian. She spoke softly to his heart. She told him the time had come to return to his own island. She whispered that his home was waiting. She spoke of his mother and the house that needed his care. Her voice was like a calm breeze. She promised that the winds would be kind and the journey safe. She told him to sail beneath the stars and seek the old herdsman upon his return. With the first light of dawn, the sky turned a soft, rosy pink. Telemachus stirred and woke his friend Pisistratus. He spoke in a low voice, ready to greet the morning. "The day is here," he said gently. "Let us prepare the horses for the road." Pisistratus looked at the gray light. "We must wait for the full sun," he answered. "We will say our farewells properly. A guest remembers kindness." Soon, the noble Menelaus came to them. His face was warm with friendship. Telemachus stood and adjusted his cloak. He asked leave to return to his own dear country. Menelaus nodded slowly. He spoke of the balance of things. He said a host should welcome a guest warmly and let him go freely when the heart calls him home. He offered a meal to strengthen them and gifts to remember him by. He spoke of bronze and gold, tokens of a bond that would last. Telemachus thanked him but remained firm in his wish to leave. He missed his home. Menelaus understood. He called for a meal to be prepared in the quiet hall. Helen, the lady of the house, went to her cedar chest. She lifted a robe of shimmering fabric. It sparkled like a star in the dim room. It was her own work, woven with care. They gathered in the hall. Menelaus presented a silver bowl rimmed with gold. It was a masterpiece of old, smooth and bright. He placed it in Telemachus's hands. Then Helen stepped forward. She offered the beautiful robe. "This is a keepsake," she said softly. "Keep it for a day of joy in the future. Until then, let your mother guard it. Go with happiness to your own land." Telemachus received the gifts with a grateful heart. They sat for a meal, sharing bread and wine in peace. The house was filled with the comfort of good company. When they were ready, they climbed into the chariot. They drove slowly through the gates. Menelaus stood before the horses with a golden cup. He poured a blessing on the ground. He wished them safety and asked them to carry his greetings to the wise Nestor. Telemachus promised to do so. As they spoke, A great bird flew high on the right. It was an eagle, strong and free. It soared through the blue sky. Helen watched it go. She smiled and said it was a good sign. It meant that the long wanderings of Ulysses would soon end. It was a promise of return. Telemachus felt a lightness in his spirit. He urged the horses forward. They moved swiftly through the town and out into the open fields. The rhythmic sound of hooves filled the air. They traveled all day as the sun made its slow arc across the sky. Evening came, and shadows stretched across the grain fields. The sun set, and the land grew dark and restful. They stopped at a welcoming house and ferried asleep. When the rosy-fingered dawn appeared again, they continued. The chariot rolled past grassy plains. The horses flew forward, eager and strong. Soon, the sandy shores of Pylos came into view. Telemachus spoke to his friend. Pisistratus, I have a favor to ask. Let us go straight to my ship. I must not delay. My heart pulls me toward the sea. Pisistratus understood. He turned the horses toward the shore. They reached the waiting ship. The crew began to prepare for the voyage. While they worked, a stranger approached. He was a traveler from a far land, a man with the gift of sight. He had walked many miles and sought a new path. He asked Telemachus for passage on the ship. He wished to leave his troubles behind and find a haven. Telemachus looked at the man with kindness. You are welcome here, he said. Come with us to Ithaca. We will share what we have. The stranger was grateful and stepped aboard. He sat near the stern. The crew loosened the ropes. They raised the mast of pine. They pulled the white sails high. Minerva sent a fresh, following wind. It filled the sails with a gentle puff. The water rippled along the hull. The ship moved gracefully over the dark, wine-colored sea. The sun dipped below the horizon again. The stars came out to guide them. The ship sailed on, carried by the wind and the will of the gods, moving peacefully toward home. Book 16. Ulysses reveals himself to Telemachus. The firelight danced gently against the wooden walls of the hut. Ulysses and the kind herdsman, Eumaeus, finished their simple supper in peace. The night air was cool outside, but inside, the room was warm and safe. Ulysses spoke softly to his friend. He tested the waters with a gentle question. Tomorrow, Ulysses said, I think I shall go to the city. I do not wish to be a burden here. I will walk the streets and perhaps find a kind soul to share a crust of bread. I might even go to the great house of the queen. Perhaps I can help with the fire or serve the guests. The herdsman shook his head with a caring smile. He was worried for his guests' comfort. Stay here, my friend, Eumaeus said. You trouble no one. The young men in the city are proud and busy. They might not notice a stranger like you. Wait until the prince returns. He is kind and will give you a warm cloak. Ulysses nodded, grateful for the herdsman's warmth. May the gods bless you, he said. You give rest to a wanderer. It is good to stop moving for a while. They sat by the embers, and Ulysses asked about the old days. He asked of the king's parents, speaking in a low, rhythmic voice. Eumaeus told him of the family. He spoke of the old king, waiting quietly in his home. He spoke of the queen who had passed away, and of the days when he was a boy, raised alongside the daughter of the house. I was loved then, Eumaeus said, looking into the fire. And though times have changed, I still have my work. I have food and wine. I can offer rest to strangers. It is a good life, though I miss the kindness of the great lady. Ulysses listened, his eyes heavy with sympathy. You have traveled far, he said. Tell me of your own home. The night was deep and still. Eumaeus settled back to tell his tale. It is a long story, the herdsman said softly. But the nights are long too. There is time to talk and time to rest. Listen to my memories." He spoke of an island called Syra, a place where the sun always turned. It was a land of plenty, with green pastures and sweet wine. There was no sickness there, only a gentle passing when people grew old. He told of how traders came from across the sea. He spoke of a nurse who carried him away on a ship when he was small. They sailed over the dark waters for 6 days. "The wind carried us," Eumaeus said, "and eventually, the waves brought me here to Ithaca. The old king bought me, and this land became my home." Ulysses nodded. "You have seen much," he said, "but now you have a safe place and a full heart." They talked until the fire burned low. Outside, the stars wheeled across the sky. Soon, the morning light began to touch the horizon. Far away, a ship glided silently into the harbor. It was the prince, Telemachus, returning from his voyage. The crew lowered the sails without a sound. They rowed gently to the shore. Telemachus stepped onto the sand. The morning air was crisp. "Go to the city," he told his men. "I will walk to the farms. I wish to see the herdsmen. I will join you later." He sent a friend to guide a guest to a warm house. Then, the prince tied on his sandals. He took his spear and walked up the path. He walked through the quiet hills toward the place where Eumaeus lived. Back at the hut, the morning meal was ready. Ulysses and Eumaeus sat in the golden light. Suddenly, the dogs pricked up their ears. They did not bark. They wagged their tails and ran to the door with joy. "Someone comes," Ulysses said. "The dogs are happy." Telemachus stood in the doorway. The herdsman jumped up, his eyes shining with tears of happiness. He ran to the prince and embraced him. It was like a father greeting a son after a long journey. "You have returned," Eumaeus said, his voice trembling with joy. "Light of my eyes. Come in, dear child. Sit and rest." Telemachus smiled gently. "I am here, old friend. Is my mother safe?" "She is safe," Eumaeus replied. "She waits patiently in her room." The prince entered the hut. Ulysses moved to give him a seat, but Telemachus stopped him with a polite hand. "Stay," the prince said. "I will find another place." Eumaeus made a soft seat of green brushwood and fleece. He brought meat and bread. They ate together in comfortable silence. When they were done, Telemachus asked about the stranger. Eumaeus explained that he was a traveler seeking refuge. "I will give him clothes and a sword," Telemachus promised. "But he should stay here with you. The city is too crowded and noisy right now." Ulysses spoke then, his voice calm and deep. He asked why the prince allowed the crowds in his house to be so rude. Telemachus sighed. "There are many of them," he said. "They come from all the islands. They wish to marry my mother. I am only one man. But go now, Eumaeus. Tell my mother I am home. Tell only her." The herdsman nodded. He put on his sandals and walked toward the town. When he was gone, the air in the hut shimmered. A beautiful woman appeared in the doorway. It was Athena, tall and radiant. She was invisible to the prince, but Ulysses saw her. She beckoned to him. Ulysses went outside into the sunlight. "It is time," the goddess whispered. "Tell your son, do not hide anymore." She touched him with a golden wand. The old rags vanished. A clean cloak appeared on his shoulders. His back straightened. His face became young and strong again. Ulysses walked back into the hut. Telemachus looked up and gasped. The stranger had changed. He looked like a king. "You are not the same," the prince whispered. "Are you a god?" "I am not a god," Ulysses said gently. "I am your father." He held his son close. Tears fell like soft rain. They held each other, letting the years of separation melt away. The relief was deep and sweet. "How did you come here?" Telemachus asked at last. "The Phaeacians brought me," Ulysses said. "They sailed while I slept. Now, tell me of the men in our house. We must know their number." Telemachus listed the men. "There were many of them. We will need help," the prince said. Ulysses smiled. "We have the gods," he said. "Athena and Zeus will watch over us." They made a plan. Telemachus would go home. Ulysses would follow, disguised again as a beggar. They would wait for the right moment to bring peace back to their home. "Keep my secret," Ulysses warned gently. "Let no one know I am here, not even your mother. We must see who is true." "I will keep the secret," Telemachus promised. Meanwhile, the ship reached the city. The crew told the queen the news. Eumaeus met the messenger on the road. They went to the queen together. "Your son is safe," Eumaeus told her. The queen's heart was lightened. The house was still full of guests, but the news brought her hope. Outside, the suitors talked. They were confused that the prince had returned safely. Some wanted to continue their rude ways. Others, like Amphinomus, spoke of peace. "Let us not harm him," Amphinomus said. "It is not right." The men listened and returned to the house. Penelope came down the stairs. She looked like moonlight in the hall. She spoke to the men with quiet dignity. "Why do you plot against my son?" she asked. "Your fathers were friends to this house. Leave us in peace." One of the men promised her safety. He spoke smooth words to calm her. Penelope went back to her room. She closed her eyes and thought of her husband. Athena sent a sweet sleep to comfort her. Evening came to the countryside. Eumaeus returned to the hut. Athena had touched Ulysses again, and he looked like an old beggar once more. "What is the news?" Telemachus asked the herdsman. "I saw a ship of men," Eumaeus said, "but I know only that you are safe." Telemachus smiled at his father in secret. The work of the day was done. They ate their supper in the warm glow of the fire. Their bellies were full, and their hearts were at rest. The night was quiet and dark. One by one, they lay down on their soft beds. The gentle gift of sleep came to them all. Book 17, Telemachus and his mother meet. Ulysses and Eumaeus come down to the town, and Ulysses is insulted by Melanthius. He is recognized by the dog Argos. He is insulted and presently struck by Antinous with a stool. Penelope desires that he shall be sent to her. The early light of dawn painted the sky in soft shades of rose and gold. Telemachus rose from his rest and tied his sandals. He picked up his spear, which felt light and familiar in his hand. He turned to his old friend, the swineherd, and spoke with a gentle voice. He explained that he must go to the city to see his mother. He knew she waited for him with a hopeful heart. He asked the swineherd to guide the stranger to town later in the day. The stranger, who was Ulysses in disguise, nodded in agreement. He spoke of the warmth of the town and the kindness of strangers. He wished to wait until the sun had warmed the morning air. The frost was still on the grass, and he preferred the comfort of the midday sun. Telemachus smiled and walked out into the yard. The morning was quiet and still. He walked with long, steady strides toward his home. When he arrived, he placed his spear against a tall pillar. He crossed the stone floor, his footsteps echoing softly. The nurse, Euryclea, saw him first. Her face lit up with joy, and she hurried to welcome him. Other maids gathered around, offering warm greetings. Then Penelope came from her room, looking as radiant as the moon. She embraced her son gently. She kissed his forehead and looked into his eyes with deep love. She whispered her relief at his safe return. She asked him about his travels and what he had seen. Telemachus spoke calmly to her. He told her to rest and refresh herself. He promised that all would be well. Telemachus then went to the gathering place in the town. He walked with his two faithful dogs by his side. The people watched him pass, admiring his calm strength. He met with old friends of his father, and they sat together in peace. They shared stories of the days gone by. A friend brought a guest to meet him, and they spoke of gifts and hospitality. Later, they returned to the house. They washed their hands in cool water from a silver basin. Servants brought trays of bread and fruit. Penelope sat nearby, spinning soft wool on her distaff. They ate and drank in comfort. When the meal was done, Penelope asked again for news of her husband. Telemachus told her of his journey to Pylos. He spoke of the wise King Nestor and the hospitality he found there. He told her of Menelaus and the fair Helen. He shared the hope that Ulysses was still alive on a distant island. His words brought a flicker of hope to Penelope's heart. A seer present in the room also spoke, promising that Ulysses was near. Penelope listened and hoped his words were true. Outside, the afternoon was pleasant. The men amused themselves with games on the level ground. The air was filled with the sounds of leisure. As evening approached, the herdsmen brought their flocks into the town. It was time for the evening meal. They went inside and prepared a feast. Meanwhile, Ulysses and the swineherd began their walk to the city. The path was rough but familiar. Ulysses leaned on his staff, looking like a weary traveler. They reached a beautiful fountain surrounded by poplar trees. The water flowed clear and cold from the rock. An altar to the nymphs stood nearby. On the road, they met a goat herd named Melanthius. He spoke with a rough voice, but Ulysses paid him no mind. Ulysses remained calm and walked on without a word. The swineherd offered a quiet prayer for his master's return. They continued their journey in peace, leaving the goat herd behind. They arrived at the great house of Ulysses. The sound of music drifted through the air. The scent of roasting meat was inviting. Ulysses paused to admire the strong walls and the double doors. He spoke to Eumaeus about the fine construction of the house. Eumaeus advised him to be careful. Ulysses nodded, understanding the ways of the world. Near the gate, an old dog lay resting. It was Argos, the hound Ulysses had raised long ago. The dog was old now and tired, but when he heard Ulysses' voice, he lifted his ears. He wagged his tail in recognition. Ulysses wiped a single tear from his cheek. He saw that his old friend remembered him. The dog closed his eyes, content and at peace. Telemachus saw Eumaeus enter and called him over. He gave him a seat and some food. Soon, Ulysses entered the hall. He sat on the ashwood threshold, leaning against a cypress post. Telemachus sent him a generous portion of bread and meat. He told Eumaeus to encourage the stranger to ask the guests for help. Ulysses walked among the tables, holding out his hand. Many of the guests gave him bread and looked at him with curiosity. They wondered who he might be. But one guest, Antinous, was not in a generous mood. He spoke sharply to the swineherd. Eumaeus answered him with quiet dignity, defending the guest. Telemachus also spoke up, asking for kindness. Antinous refused to share his food. He looked coldly at the stranger. Ulysses spoke to him, telling a story of his own past travels and misfortunes. He hoped to touch the man's heart, but Antinous remained hard. He did not offer a gift. Ulysses stood firm, like a rock, and did not waver. He returned to his seat by the door, his heart patient. Penelope heard of the stranger in the hall. She asked her nurse about him. She wished to speak with him, hoping he had news of Ulysses. She called for Eumaeus. She asked him to bring the stranger to her. She wanted to offer him a warm cloak and hear his story. Eumaeus took the message to Ulysses. Ulysses listened carefully. He told Eumaeus that he had much to say, but he wished to wait until the sun had set. He wanted to speak with Penelope by the firelight when the hall was quiet. He did not want to cause trouble among the guests. Eumaeus returned to Penelope with the answer. She agreed that the stranger was wise. It would be better to talk in the peace of the evening. She waited patiently in her room. Eumaeus went back to Telemachus and whispered in his ear. He said he must return to his farm to tend to the herds. Telemachus nodded and told him to go in peace. He He promised to take care of things at the house. Eumaeus finished his meal and rose from the table. He walked out of the hall and began his journey home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. The evening stars began to appear. The house settled into the rhythm of the night. Book 18. The Fight with Irus. Ulysses warns Amphinomus. Penelope gets presents from the suitors. The braziers. Ulysses rebukes Eurymachus. The sun began to dip low over the city of Ithaca. Long shadows stretched across the smooth pavement of the courtyard. A wanderer named Iris approached the great house. He was a large man, known for roaming the quiet streets. He saw Ulysses sitting by the threshold and paused. Iris spoke, asking the stranger to move from the doorway. His voice was loud in the peaceful evening air. Ulysses looked up with calm, steady eyes. "There is room enough for both of us," Ulysses said gently. "The world is wide, and the stars look down on us all." The men inside the hall heard their voices. They looked out, amused by the two figures in the twilight. Antinous, one of the leaders, laughed softly. "Look," he said, "a contest of strength is about to begin." The others gathered around, holding their warm cups of wine. They promised a hot meal to the one who stood tallest. Ulysses stood up and adjusted his tattered clothes. Beneath the rags, his shoulders were broad and strong. The ancient goddess Minerva watched over him unseen. She gave his limbs a renewed grace and power. The guests whispered in wonder at his sturdy frame. Iris felt a hesitation in his heart. He saw the quiet strength in the older man. The servants guided Iris to the center of the court. He trembled slightly, like a leaf in a gentle breeze. Antinous spoke to him, but his words were not harsh. He simply reminded Iris of the journey ahead if he failed. The two men raised their hands, outlined against the firelight. Ulysses moved with the wisdom of many years. He did not wish to cause harm. He only wanted the matter settled quickly. With a swift, controlled motion, he touched Iris on the neck. It was a light blow, but full of hidden strength. Iris sat down in the dust, his energy spent. The contest was over as soon as it had begun. Ulysses helped him to the outer gate. "Sit here and rest," Ulysses said kindly. "Watch the gate and let the peace of the evening settle on you." He returned to his place on the threshold. The guests laughed gently, impressed by the outcome. They welcomed Ulysses back to the warmth of the hall. Amphinomus, a man of good nature, brought bread and wine. He offered the golden cup to the traveler. "Good health to you, Father Stranger," he said warmly. "May your days be bright and your burdens light." Ulysses looked at the young man with wisdom. He spoke of the changing tides of life. "Man is like the leaves in the wind," Ulysses said softly. "We must walk with humble hearts and kindness." He poured a small offering on the ground for the gods. Amphinomus listened, nodding his head in thought. He walked back to his seat, feeling the weight of the words. Upstairs, the lady Penelope felt a wave of sleepiness. The goddess Minerva sent a sweet slumber upon her. She rested on her soft couch, her breathing slow and deep. In her dreams, grace and beauty washed over her. Her face glowed like the pale moon. She woke feeling refreshed, the weariness gone from her spirit. "What a sweet sleep I have had," she whispered. She rose and smoothed her dress. Attended by her maids, she walked down the stairs. She stood by a tall wooden pillar in the hall. A veil covered her face, soft as mist. The guests fell silent, admiring her calm presence. She spoke to her son, Telemachus. Her voice was low and steady. She asked him to guide the house with care. "Be kind to the stranger," she said gently. "Let peace reign within these walls." Telemachus nodded. understanding her heart. "I see things clearly now, mother," he replied. "I wish only for quiet and order in our home." He looked at the suitor, Eurymachus, who stepped forward. Eurymachus praised Penelope's wisdom and grace. "You are the jewel of this house," he said. Penelope spoke of her husband, far away. She remembered his parting words with a nostalgic sigh. "He told me to watch over the home," she said. "He told me to be strong until the seasons changed." Her voice was like a sad, sweet song. She asked the guests to remember the old ways of giving. The men were moved by her gentle request. They sent their servants to fetch beautiful gifts. One brought a robe embroidered with flowers. It had 12 golden pins that caught the light. Another brought a chain of amber beads. They glowed like captured sunlight in the dim room. Earrings and necklaces were placed before her. Each gem sparkled like a star in the night sky. Penelope gathered her gifts and returned to her room. The evening deepened into night. The guests turned to music and slow dancing. They moved rhythmically until the sky was dark. Maids brought in 3 large braziers to give light. They piled on dry wood that crackled merrily. Flames danced, casting warm orange glows on the walls. Ulysses spoke to the maids who tended the fires. "Go to your mistress and rest," he said softly. "I will tend the lights and watch the embers." Some of the maids giggled and whispered. One maid, Melantho, spoke sharply, but her voice faded. Ulysses answered her firmly, but without shouting. The maids scurried away, leaving him by the fire. He stood near the burning wood, watching the sparks rise. Athena, the protector, kept watch over the room. Eurymachus joked about the light reflecting on Ulysses. "The light seems to come from within him," he teased. He asked Ulysses if he would work in the fields. "I could give you work planting trees," he said. Ulysses answered with a story of the fields. He spoke of long summer days and the smell of hay. "I can plow a straight furrow," Ulysses said gently. "I can work from dawn until the stars appear." His words were steady, like the earth itself. Eurymachus felt a flash of annoyance, but it passed. The room grew noisy for a moment, then quieted. Telemachus stood up, his voice calm and clear. "Friends," he said, "the hour is late. We have feasted and shared stories. Let us now find rest in our own homes." The guests admired his calm authority. Amphinomus spoke up in agreement. "Let us pour a final offering to the gods," he said. "Then we shall leave the stranger to his rest." A servant mixed the wine and water in a great bowl. They poured the libations, honoring the quiet night. One by one, they finished their drinks. Feeling the gentle pull of sleep, they turned to leave. They walked out into the cool, starry darkness. Peace settled over the great hall of Ulysses. Book 19. Telemachus and Ulysses remove the armor. Ulysses interviews Penelope. Euryclea washes his feet and recognizes the scar on his leg. Penelope tells her dream to Ulysses. The great hall stood silent and vast. Shadows danced gently upon the walls. Ulysses and Telemachus moved with quiet purpose. They gathered the armor and shields from the walls. They carried them to the storeroom for safekeeping. A soft, golden light guided their path. The goddess Minerva held a lamp before them. Its glow was as warm as the evening sun. The wooden beams above shone with a peaceful radiance. Telemachus marveled at the beautiful light. Ulysses whispered for him to be at peace. The work was done, and the hall was clear. Telemachus went to his room to rest. Ulysses remained alone in the quiet cloister. He sat in the stillness, waiting. Soon, Penelope came down from her chamber. She moved with the grace of the moon. Her maids brought a chair of silver and ivory. They placed it near the warming fire. A soft fleece was laid upon the seat. Penelope sat, bathed in the firelight's glow. The maids cleared away the remnants of the feast. They heaped fresh logs upon the embers. The fire crackled, casting a cozy light. A maid spoke a hasty word to the stranger, but the moment passed, and calm returned. Penelope asked for a seat for the traveler. She wished to speak with him by the fire. "Tell me, stranger," she asked softly, "who are you, and from where do you come?" Ulysses spoke in a low, steady voice. He praised her wisdom and her grace. He spoke of a fair island called Crete. He told a tale of long ago. He spoke of the winds and the sea. He described meeting Ulysses in that distant land. He told of the hospitality shared between them. Penelope listened, and her heart was touched. Tears fell from her eyes like melting snow. They were tears of memory and love. Ulysses watched her with deep kindness. He kept his own emotions still and deep. She asked him to describe her husband's clothes. It was a test of his memory. Ulysses described a purple mantle. He spoke of a golden brooch with a delicate design. He remembered the soft fabric of the shirt. Penelope wept softly to hear these true words. She knew he had indeed met her husband. Ulysses offered her comfort in the quiet night. "Do not grieve," he said gently. "Ulysses is near and safe. He gathers treasures to bring home. He will return before the next moon changes." His voice was a promise in the dark. Penelope called for her trusted nurse. "Euryclea," she said, "wash the feet of this guest. He has traveled far, like your master." The old nurse wept for her absent king. She brought a basin of shining brass. She mixed cold water with the hot. Ulysses sat in the shadows, away from the fire. He remembered an old scar on his leg. It was a mark from his youth. Long ago, he had walked the green hills of Parnassus. He had hunted in the deep, quiet woods. He remembered the cool morning air. He remembered the return to his parents. They had healed him with love and care. Euryclea bathed his weary feet. Her hands felt the familiar scar. She knew the touch instantly. Joy flooded her heart. She looked up at his face. "You are Ulysses," she whispered. She wanted to call out to Penelope, but Ulysses placed a gentle hand on her. He signaled for silence and secrecy. "Hush, nurse," he whispered kindly. "Let this be our secret for a little longer." Euryclea nodded, her heart full of peace. She finished her task with tender care. She brought more warm water and oil. She made him comfortable by the hearth. Penelope spoke again to the stranger. The night was deepening around them. She told him of a dream she had. An eagle had come to her garden. It spoke to her with a human voice. It promised the return of her husband. "The dream is true," Ulysses assured her. "All will be well in this house." Penelope spoke of a contest for the morning. She would bring out the great bow of Ulysses. She would see who could string it. "Do not delay," Ulysses said softly. "Your husband will return to see it." The fire burned low in the grate. "It is time for rest," Penelope said. She rose from her chair by the fire. Her heart felt lighter than before. She ascended the stairs to her room. Her handmaidens followed her. She lay down upon her soft bed. Thoughts of her husband filled her mind. The gray-eyed goddess Minerva watched over her. She shed a sweet, deep sleep upon her eyes. The house was still. Peace settled over the halls of Ithaca. Book 20. Ulysses cannot sleep. Penelope's prayer to Diana. The two signs from heaven. Eumaeus and Philoetius arrive. The suitors dine. Tisippus throws an ox's foot at Ulysses. Theoclymenus foretells disaster and leaves the house. Ulysses lay down to rest in the quiet cloister. He rested upon soft skins of sheep. A warm cloak was draped over him for comfort. The night was still, but his mind was active. He thought about the future and his home. He turned from side to side, seeking sleep. Like a fire warming a room, his thoughts flickered. He wondered how to restore peace to his house. The night air was cool and silent around him. Then, a gentle presence appeared near him. It was Minerva, descending softly from the heavens. She looked upon him with kind eyes. "Rest now," she whispered in the dark. "You are in your own home. Your family is safe nearby." Ulysses looked up and felt a sense of calm. "I worry about the days ahead," he confessed. "The task seems so large for one man." Minerva smiled a reassuring smile. "Trust in the journey," she said softly. "You have been guided this far. Close your eyes and let go of your cares. Sleep is a gift you must accept." She sprinkled a soft drowsiness over his eyes. Ulysses felt his heavy limbs relax. He drifted into a deep and peaceful slumber. Upstairs, Penelope awoke from her rest. She sat up in her soft bed. Her heart felt full of emotion. She looked out at the moonlit night. She whispered a prayer to the gentle goddess Diana. "Let me find peace," she murmured. "Let the winds carry my worries away." She thought of her husband, far away. In her dreams, he had been beside her. The memory was sweet and comforting. She longed for the day he would return. The night held her sorrow in its quiet embrace. Morning light began to paint the sky. Dawn broke with a soft, gray light. Ulysses awoke to the sound of the new day. He gathered his blankets and set them aside. He stepped out into the fresh morning air. He lifted his hands to the brightening sky. "Father Jove," he prayed quietly, "if I am meant to be here, show me a sign. Let me know that hope is near." High above, a rumble of thunder rolled. It was a deep, comforting sound from the clouds. Ulysses smiled when he heard it. Nearby, a woman was grinding grain. She paused in her rhythmic work. She heard the thunder in the clear sky. She looked up and made a wish. "Let this hard work come to an end," she whispered. "Let peace return to this house." Ulysses heard her words and felt encouraged. He knew the day would bring change. Inside, the house began to stir. Servants rose to light the hearth fires. Telemachus dressed for the day. He strapped on his sandals and walked tall. He spoke to the nurse, Euryclea. "Did our guest sleep well?" he asked kindly. "He rested in the cloister," she replied. "We made him comfortable with warm robes." Telemachus nodded and went out to the courtyard. Euryclea clapped her hands gently. "Come now," she told the maids. "Let us make the house beautiful. Sweep the floors and sprinkle fresh water. Wipe the tables with soft sponges. The guest will be here soon." The women moved with a steady rhythm. They fetched clear water from the fountain. The house hummed with the sound of work. Wood was chopped for the fires. The air smelled of fresh water and clean stone. The herdsmen began to arrive from the fields. Eumaeus brought his animals to the yard. He greeted Ulysses with a warm smile. "I hope the morning greets you well," he said. "May the day bring you fairness," Ulysses replied. Melanthius arrived with his goats. He was less kind, but the morning remained peaceful. Philoetius, the cattleman, joined them. He looked at Ulysses with thoughtful eyes. "Good day to you, stranger," he said politely. "You remind me of my old master. He was a good and noble man. I miss him and hope for his return." Ulysses looked at the loyal man. "Have hope," Ulysses said softly. "Your master will return soon. Peace will be restored to this home." The herdsman nodded, wishing it to be true. They stood together in the morning light. A bird flew overhead, soaring high. It was a sign of the shifting tides. The men watched it glide on the wind. The guests began to gather for the feast. They laid their cloaks on the benches. The aroma of roasting meat filled the air. Cups were filled with sweet wine. Bread was passed around in baskets. Telemachus sat at his own table. He made sure Ulysses had a place to sit. "Eat and drink in peace," Telemachus said. "This is a house of welcome." The guests ate and talked amongst themselves. The atmosphere was busy but steady. The day moved forward slowly. The sun warmed the stone floors. Penelope sat in her chair, watching. She listened to the voices below. The meal continued with rich food and drink. A seer spoke of shadows and light. He sensed a change coming to the house. He spoke of it quietly, then left the hall. The others did not understand his words. They continued their feast as the afternoon waned. The house waited, calm and expectant. The story was ready to unfold. Book 21. The Trial of the Axes, during which Ulysses reveals himself to Eumaeus and Philoetius. Minerva sent a gentle thought to Penelope's heart. It was time to bring forth the great bow for a contest. Penelope rose and took the bronze key with the ivory handle. She walked softly to the far storeroom. The house was quiet and filled with the scent of old timber. She unlocked the heavy door. The hinges hummed a low, deep note as they turned. Inside, the air was fragrant with cedar and herbs. Chests of linen and gold rested in the dim light. Penelope reached for the bow and its case from the peg. It was a keepsake from a dear friend of long ago. She sat for a moment with the bow on her knees. Memories of the past washed over her like a warm tide. When her heart felt lighter, she rose to join the others. Her maidens followed, carrying a chest of bronze and iron. Penelope stood by a tall pillar in the great hall. She held a sheer veil before her face. Her voice was calm as she spoke to the gathered guests. She told them that whoever could string the bow would win her hand. It was a solemn promise made in the quiet of the afternoon. The faithful herdsman Eumaeus took the bow. Tears came to his eyes as he set the iron axes in a row. He remembered his master fondly. Antinous spoke to him, but his voice was hushed in the large room. He told the herdsman to be at peace. Telemachus rose then. He spoke with a light spirit. He wished to try the bow himself. He dug a long groove in the earth floor. He set the axes in a straight, orderly line. The guests watched in silence, impressed by his care. Telemachus stood on the stone pavement. He tried to draw the string 3 times. The wood was stiff and strong. He was young, and his time had not yet come. He smiled and set the bow aside, leaning it against the smooth door. The guests then took their turns. Leodes was the first. He was a gentle man who disliked harsh words. He tried to bend the wood, but his hands were soft. He could not string it. He spoke quietly, saying it was a task for a stronger man. He sat down and let his mind wander to other things. Antinous suggested they warm the bow. He asked for a fire and some soft lard. The fire crackled in the center of the room. Its warmth spread through the hall. The young men greased the wood, hoping to make it pliable. They tried again, but the ancient bow remained firm. Outside in the courtyard, the traveler followed the 2 herdsmen. The air was fresh and cool. He spoke to them gently. He asked where their hearts lay. They told him they longed for their master's return. The traveler smiled. He told them he was Odysseus, returned at last after 20 years. He showed them a scar on his leg, a mark from his youth. The 2 men wept with joy. They embraced him under the open sky. The afternoon sun warmed their shoulders. Odysseus told them to dry their eyes. They needed to be calm. He gave them simple instructions for the doors and the gates. They nodded, their hearts full of hope. Then they returned to the hall, one by one. Inside, Eurymachus held the bow near the fire. He sighed, for he could not bend it either. He was not angry, only wistful. He felt the weight of the years. Antinous spoke to comfort him. He said it was a holy day, a day for rest. They would try again tomorrow. The traveler then spoke from his humble seat. He asked if he might hold the bow. He wished only to see if his old strength remained. The guests murmured, unsure of this request. Penelope answered with grace. She said the stranger should have his chance. She promised him warm clothes and safe passage if he succeeded. Her words were kind and fair. Telemachus then spoke to his mother. He asked her to rest. He promised to look after the bow and the hall. Penelope listened to her son's wisdom. She went up the stairs to her room. Athena sent a sweet, dreamless sleep to close her eyes. In the hall, Eumaeus carried the bow to the traveler. The others made low sounds of doubt, but he walked on. He placed the polished wood in the traveler's hands. The nurse Euryclea quietly closed the doors to the inner rooms. Philoetius went to the outer gate. He tied it shut with a soft rope. The house was now a secure and quiet world of its own. The traveler held the bow. He turned it over in his hands. He checked the horns for any wear. He handled it with the love of a craftsman. The room went very still. He strung the bow with a single, fluid motion. It was as easy for him as a bard stringing a harp. He plucked the string with his right hand. It sang a beautiful, clear note. It sounded like the call of a swallow in the summer air. The guests watched in wonder. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance, a sign from the heavens. The traveler felt a deep peace. He took an arrow from the table. He laid it against the bridge of the bow. He did not even rise from his chair. He drew the string back. His aim was true and steady. The arrow flew. It passed through the handle hole of every axe. It did not graze a single piece of iron. It flew straight and true out into the courtyard. The traveler turned to his son. He spoke softly. The contest was over. The light of day was fading into evening. It was time for the household to gather. Telemachus stood by his father's side. They were together at last in the golden light of the hall. Book 22. The Killing of the Suitors. The maids who have misconduct themselves are made to cleanse the cloisters and are then hanged. Ulysses stood upon the broad stone threshold. The heavy rags of the beggar fell away from his shoulders. He held his great bow, not as a weapon of war, but as a symbol of his return. The wood was smooth and warm in his hand. He looked out over the great hall, where the evening light cast long, soft shadows. "The waiting is at an end," he said. His voice was low and steady, like the deep roll of the ocean. "The contest is finished. Now, order shall return to this house." He lifted the bow. The movement was slow and graceful. The time for games had passed. An arrow flew, singing through the air. It struck Antinous, and he fell into a deep and endless sleep. The cup dropped from his hand, and silence filled the room. The men in the hall looked up. A hush fell over the room, heavy and still. They saw the man standing in the doorway. They saw the strength in his arms and the calm light in his eyes. They knew then who he was. "Stranger," one whispered, though he knew this was no stranger. "You stand in the house of a king." Ulysses looked at them. His gaze was firm but quiet. "I have returned from Troy," he said. "The long years of my journey are over. You have feasted here for too long." The men turned pale with the sudden weight of the truth. Eurymachus stood up slowly. He spoke with a humble voice. "If you are truly Ulysses," he said, "then you are right. We have stayed too long. Allow us to make amends." Ulysses lowered his bow slightly, but his resolve was like iron. "The time for words is past," he said gently. "It is time for the reckoning. The house must be cleansed." There was no shouting. There was only the swift flight of arrows. One by one, the men felt the weight of their fate. They sank to the floor, their spirits drifting away like mist. Eurymachus fell, and then Amphinomus. They entered the long night, their earthly cares forgotten. Telemachus stood by his father, strong and steady. The loyal swineherd and the stockman stood with them. The presence of the king filled the room. "Father," Telemachus said softly, "the hall is quiet." "Yes," Ulysses answered. "The house is ours again." In the corner, the minstrel Phemius sat holding his lyre. He had watched in silence, unsure of his place. He set the instrument down gently. Ulysses turned to him. "Do not fear," he said with a faint smile. "Music belongs in this home. Play a soft song. Let the old melodies wash away the noise of the past." Telemachus went to the minstrel. "Stay," he whispered. "And Medon, the herald, you are safe as well. We are all safe now." The minstrel's fingers brushed the strings. A gentle, humming note floated through the air. It was a sound of peace. Ulysses looked around the vast room. The tables were cluttered with the remnants of the feast. "Call the nurse, Euryclea," he said to his son. "It is time to cleanse the hall." The old nurse appeared from the women's chambers. She saw Ulysses standing tall and unhurt. Her eyes filled with tears of joy. She opened her mouth to cry out in happiness, but Ulysses raised a hand gently. "Hush, good nurse," he soothed. "Let us be calm. Let us work in silence. The night is for rest, not for loud noises." He asked the women of the house to come down. They did not come in fear, but with a sense of duty. Together, they began to tidy the room. They cleared away the cups and the plates. They swept the stone floor until it was clean and bare. The work was rhythmic and slow. There was no anger in their movements. It was the work of restoring a home. They wiped down the tables with clean sponges and fresh water. The memory of the suitors faded with every sweep of the broom. When the room was orderly, Ulysses asked for a fire. Euryclea brought a brazier of glowing coals. She sprinkled sulfur over the embers. A pale, sweet smoke rose up. It drifted into the corners of the room, purifying the air. The scent was clean and sharp, like the smell of the sea after a storm. The smoke curled around the pillars and up to the wooden roof. It chased away the stale air of the feast. The hall felt fresh again. It felt ready for sleep. The loyal women of the house gathered around Ulysses. They held torches that burned with a soft, golden light. They saw their king, home at last. They came forward gently to greet him. They took his hands and kissed them. They touched his shoulders lightly, welcoming him back. Ulysses looked at their familiar faces. He remembered them all from the years before he sailed away. A great warmth filled his heart. The long journey was truly over. He was surrounded by peace and soft light and the quiet comfort of home. Book 23. Penelope eventually recognizes her husband. Early in the morning, Ulysses, Telemachus, Eumaeus, and Philoetius leave the town. The old nurse Euryclea went up the stairs with a light heart. Her steps were quick and joyful as she moved toward the quiet room where the queen slept. She bent gently over the sleeping form of her mistress. "Wake up, dear child," she whispered softly. "Open your eyes to the morning. The one you have waited for is here. Ulysses has come home at last. The house is safe, and peace has returned to our halls." Penelope stirred from her deep, sweet slumber. She looked at the nurse with heavy, sleepy eyes. She spoke in a low voice. "Dear nurse, you speak of dreams. The gods send us dreams that feel so real. Why do you wake me from such a restful sleep? I have not slept so soundly since the day my husband left. Let me rest." But the nurse persisted gently. "I am not mocking you, my child. It is true. He is here in the house. The stranger by the fire was him all along." Penelope sat up, her heart beating a little faster. She held the nurse's hands. "Tell me," she asked quietly, "how could he return alone? How could he bring peace to a house so full of trouble?" "I did not see it," Euryclea answered softly. "I only know that the house is now his again. He stands by the fire, waiting. He has sent me to call you. Come, let your heart be glad. The long wait is over." Penelope rose from her soft couch. She walked slowly, lost in thought. She wondered how she should greet him. Should she stand back? Should she rush to him? Her heart was full of hope and hesitation. She descended the stairs, and crossed the smooth stone floor. She sat by the warm hearth, opposite the man who sat in the firelight. He looked down at the ground, waiting for her to speak. The room was very quiet. The fire crackled softly. She looked at him, then looked away. Sometimes she thought she knew him. Other times, his weary clothes made him seem like a stranger. The silence stretched out, comfortable and heavy. Her son, Telemachus, spoke gently from the side. "Mother, why do you sit so far away? Why do you not speak to him?" No other woman would remain silent when her husband returns after 20 years. "Your heart is cautious," Penelope answered softly. "My son, I am lost in wonder. I have no words yet. I cannot look him fully in the face. But if it is truly him, we shall know each other. We have secrets that only the two of us know, signs that are hidden from the world." Ulysses smiled. His face was kind. "Let her take her time," he said. "She will know me soon enough. For now, I look like a weary traveler. Let us first make the house ready for peace." He spoke of a plan to bring joy to the evening. "We shall have music," he said. "Let the lyre play a sweet tune. Let there be dancing. If anyone walks by outside, let them think there is a wedding feast. Let them hear only happiness." And so it was done. The house was bathed in warm water and fresh clothes. The musician took up his hollow lyre. He played a song of sweet longing. The melody filled the stone halls. The sound of light footsteps echoed as the household danced. Outside in the cool evening air, people heard the music. They smiled and said, "Surely there is joy in the queen's house tonight." Inside, Ulysses bathed and refreshed himself. He put on a fine cloak. He looked tall and strong, like a king. His hair was thick and curled like the petals of a hyacinth flower. He shone with a calm grace, like gold overlaid on silver by a master craftsman. He returned to his seat by the fire. He looked at his wife. "You are still cautious," he said gently. "Your heart is strong and guarded. Nurse, make a bed for me to sleep alone." Penelope spoke then, testing him one last time. "Euryclea, move the great bed outside the chamber. Make it soft with fleeces and warm blankets." Ulysses looked at her. A spark of his old spirit showed. "Wife," he said, "who could move that bed? It would be a hard task. I built it myself, long ago." He began to describe the work of his hands. He spoke of the olive tree that once grew in the courtyard. Its leaves were long, and its trunk was thick. "I built our room around that tree," he said. "I did not cut it down. I smoothed the wood of the trunk. I made it the post of the bed. I inlaid it with gold and silver and ivory. I stretched crimson leather across it. The roots are deep in the earth. Is the tree still there?" Penelope felt her heart melt. He knew the secret. He knew the story of the olive tree. Tears of relief filled her eyes. She ran to him and threw her arms around his neck. "Do not be angry," she whispered. "I had to be sure. The world is full of tricks. But now I know. You are truly here. The bed you built still stands." He held her close. They wept together, soft tears of pure joy. It was like the feeling of a swimmer who finally touches the warm sand after a long struggle in the sea. They held each other, safe at last. The night seemed to pause for them. The goddess Athena held back the dawn. She kept the horses of the morning waiting in the ocean. She let the night stretch out, long and peaceful, so they could rest. Ulysses spoke quietly to his wife. "We have found our way back to each other. There are still journeys to come, but tonight we rest." They went to their room, guided by the nurse and the soft light of torches. The room was familiar and safe. They lay down in the bed built from the olive tree. In the quiet dark, they talked. Penelope told him of the long years of waiting. She told him of her patience. Ulysses told her of his travels. He spoke of the wide sea and the strange islands. He spoke of the lotus eaters and the winds. He told her of the stars he had followed. His voice was low and rhythmic. He told her of the kind people who had helped him. He told her how he was finally sent home with gifts of bronze and gold. As he finished his tale, a deep and healing sleep fell upon him. It eased the burden of his years. He slept safely in his own home. When the long night was over, the dawn finally arrived. The golden light touched the sky. Ulysses rose from the soft bed. "It is morning," he said. "We have rested. Now I must go to the wooded farm to see my father. He has waited a long time." He dressed in his armor, but he did not look for battle. He called his son and his faithful herdsmen. They walked out of the gates together. The sun was rising, but a gentle mist covered them. They walked through the town unseen, wrapped in the quiet protection of the morning. They moved toward the green fields and the peace of the countryside. Book 24. The Ghosts of the Suitors in Hades. Ulysses and his men go to the house of Laertes. The people of Ithaca come out to attack Ulysses, but Minerva concludes a peace. Mercury of the golden wand moved softly through the shadows. In his hand, he held the staff that brings rest to weary eyes. With a gentle motion, he guided the spirits of the suitors on their final journey. They followed him quietly, drifting like autumn leaves on a slow breeze. They passed beyond the streams of the great ocean. They floated past the white rock and the gates of the setting sun. Soon, they reached a meadow of soft, pale flowers. Here, the tired souls found their eternal rest. The air was still and sweet in this quiet place. Old friends gathered together on the grass. Great heroes of the past stood side by side in peace. They spoke in low, murmuring voices of days long gone. They remembered the sea and the ships and the distant shores. One spoke of a grand farewell, attended by the daughters of the sea. He recalled the mist rising from the water. He remembered the 9 muses singing with voices like silver bells. Their song had drifted over the waves, soothing every heart. There was no pain in these memories, only the golden haze of time. Into this peaceful gathering came the new spirits from the island of Ithaca. They were greeted with gentle curiosity. One spirit told the tale of the queen who waited at home. He spoke of her patience and her wisdom. He described the great loom where she sat by torchlight. Night after night, she wove a fine, silken cloth. The house was silent as she worked the threads with care. She was faithful and steady, like a star in the night sky. The story was told without anger, fading into the quiet air of the meadow. Far away, in the world of the living, the sun was shining. Ulysses walked slowly away from the town. He made his way toward the green, rolling hills of the countryside. He sought the farm of his father, the old King Laertes. The orchard was well kept and full of life. Vines climbed in neat rows, warming in the sunlight. Ulysses walked beneath the branches of tall pear trees. He found his father alone, tending to the earth. The old man wore simple clothes and a cap of goatskin. He worked slowly, caring for each plant with a gardener's love. Ulysses stood under a pear tree, watching him in silence. His heart swelled with warmth and a gentle sadness. He stepped forward, his footsteps soft on the soil. He spoke of the garden's beauty. "The flowers and the figs flourish under your hand," he said gently. The old man looked up, his eyes dim with age. They spoke of the past and of the son who had been away so long. To prove who he was, Ulysses spoke of the trees. "Do you remember the trees you gave me when I was a boy?" he asked. 13 pear trees and 10 apple trees," he recited softly, "and 40 fig trees and the rows of vines that yield sweet grapes." The memory brought a light to the old man's eyes. Recognition dawned like the morning sun. Laertes let go of his sorrow. He embraced his son, and Ulysses held him close. They walked together toward the farmhouse, arm in arm. Inside, a simple meal was prepared. They sat on wooden benches, surrounded by faithful friends. The old man washed and put on fresh, clean robes. He looked strong again, his spirit renewed by joy. They ate and drank in the comfort of their home. Outside, the news of the king's return spread through the island. People gathered, their voices rising like the tide. Some were angry, remembering old grievances. They marched toward the farm, seeking answers. But the goddess Minerva watched over them from the clouds. She spoke to the Father of gods, asking for peace. Let there be friendship between them, was the decree. Let peace and plenty reign over the land. Minerva descended like a breath of wind. The two groups met near the farm, under the open sky. Before a blow could be struck, a great voice rang out. It was a voice of calm authority, stopping them in their tracks. Cease this strife, the goddess commanded softly. Settle your hearts and return to your homes. The anger drained away, replaced by a sudden stillness. The weapons fell to the grass, forgotten. A sense of calm descended upon the island of Ithaca. The sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shadows. The king and his people made a covenant of lasting peace. The long years of waiting were over. The long years of wandering were done. Ulysses stood with his family, safe at last. The island settled into a deep, dreamless slumber. Quiet rested on the hills and on the sea and in every home. And so, our journey through these pages comes to a peaceful close. The long wandering is over, and the house is quiet under the starlight. May your dreams be gentle and your night serene. Rest now, knowing that the destination has been reached. Until the next moonrise, let the calm of the night sustain you. Take a final slow breath and let go. I'll meet you here again for another quiet tale.